The Maya civilization stands as one of the most remarkable societies in the history of the ancient Americas, and indeed, in the history of the world. For thousands of years, the Maya people have lived, and continue to live, in the region that today includes southern Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Belize, parts of Honduras, and El Salvador. Long before European contact, the Maya built magnificent cities, home to large, thriving populations. They excelled in the visual arts and developed a sophisticated writing system, which recorded their deep knowledge in areas like mathematics, astronomy, and the calendar. What makes the Maya even more fascinating is that they achieved all of this without a centralized government or empire. Unlike other ancient civilizations, there was never a single, unified Maya state. Instead, the Maya world was made up of numerous evolving ethnic groups, each speaking its own distinct language. When the Europeans arrived, the Maya region was divided into dozens of city-states or small kingdoms. Even after the Spanish colonized parts of the region in the 16th and 17th centuries, they never managed to unite the entire Maya world. Today, the region remains divided by modern national borders, but the Maya people and their culture have endured. The Maya region itself is geographically diverse, with three major areas that are strikingly different from one another. In the north, there is the flat, arid Yucatan Peninsula, with its limestone landscape and lack of rivers. In the center, there are hilly, tropical rainforests, and in the south, the volcanic highlands. Despite these differences, something unique and enduring, what we call Maya culture, has existed for millennia, and it continues to captivate people around the world. The Maya are worth our attention not only because of their achievements, but also because they present a mystery. Since the arrival of Europeans in the early 1500s, Maya communities and their traditions have faced systematic destruction and oppression. Yet, at the same time, the outside world has shown a deep interest in uncovering and understanding Maya civilization. This has led to a paradox. The Maya are both misunderstood and heavily studied, shrouded in mystery, yet a subject of fascination. In the early days of studying the Maya, scholars divided their history into three broad periods: the pre-classic, the classic, and the post-classic. These terms were based on an evolutionary model, which suggested that the classic period represented the height of Maya culture, while the pre-classic was seen as a time of development, and the post-classic as a period of decline. However, modern research has shown that this model is overly simplistic. Some scholars now refer to the period that includes the pre-classic and classic as the Mayascene, a term that reflects the global early Anthropocene era, spanning from around 3000 BCE to 1000 CE. Despite this shift in understanding, the traditional periodization of Maya history remains widely used. The Maya civilization is often discussed in terms of its various ethnic groups. There are roughly 30 Maya ethnic groups, each defined by its language. Scholars refer to these groups by their specific names, such as the Yucatec Maya or the Kaqchikel Maya, rather than using the more general term Maya. The Maya languages are a key part of their identity, and around 30 of these languages have survived into the modern era. At the time of first contact with the Spanish, there were likely even more. Most of the hieroglyphic inscriptions from the Classic period were written in languages from the Colloid language group, particularly Classic Choltian, which is the ancestor of the modern Chorti language. Today, the largest Maya language area is the Yucatan Peninsula, where the Yucatec Maya language is spoken. This region, with its flat landscape and lack of natural barriers like mountains or rivers, has historically been home to the largest number of Maya speakers. As we explore the history of the Maya, there are several key themes to consider. The first is Maya identity. Interestingly, the people we call Maya never thought of themselves as a single group. The term Maya was not widely used until the 19th century, and before that, it was a relatively obscure term, limited to a specific region of the Yucatan. So, how did the people we now call Maya see themselves? And how did the concept of Maya civilization come to be invented? These are important questions, as the idea of the Maya is, in some ways, a modern construct, but one that reveals deeper truths about their culture and history. Another important theme is the political structure of the Maya. Unlike other ancient civilizations, the Maya never had a single empire. Instead, their world was made up of numerous city-states, each with its own political system. What was life like in these city-states, both for those at the center of power and for those on the margins? These questions apply not only to the period before European contact, but also to the centuries that followed. Even after the arrival of the Spanish, Maya communities persisted, adapting to new realities while maintaining their cultural identity. The Maya have faced many challenges over the centuries, from colonization to modern-day pressures. Yet their history is not just one of victimization. It is also a story of resilience, adaptation, and survival. The Maya have continued to find ways to preserve their culture and traditions, whether in the villages where they have lived for millennia or in new communities far from their ancestral lands. In the end, the story of the Maya is one of both continuity and change. Their civilization has evolved over thousands of years, but the core elements of their culture have remained remarkably resilient. Today, the Maya people continue to live in the region that has been their home for millennia, and their culture continues to inspire and intrigue people around the world. The Maya civilization has long fascinated scholars and the public alike, not just for its achievements, but for the mysteries that seem to surround it. One of the most intriguing aspects of Maya culture is how they viewed the world around them. Their perception extended far beyond their immediate surroundings, encompassing foreign visitors, invaders, and even the supernatural. The Maya had a deep connection to the celestial universe, and their understanding of the cosmos was woven into their daily lives. This cosmic vision shaped much of their art, architecture, and religious practices. Artistic expression was central to Maya life. The objects they carved, painted, and built were not just functional or decorative, they were reflections of their beliefs and their understanding of the world. The Maya lived in a world of vibrant color and intricate design, where every object had meaning. Their art was a way of communicating with the gods, with each other, and with future generations. It's no wonder that Maya civilization is often described as one of the most visually captivating in history. But beyond their art and their cosmic vision, there's another layer to the Maya story that has captured the imagination of many: the so-called mysteries of the Maya. For centuries, the Maya have been seen as an enigma, a puzzle waiting to be solved. This perception began with the arrival of Europeans in the Americas. When Christopher Columbus first encountered the Maya in 1502, he and those who followed him were struck by the sophistication of their cities and the complexity of their culture. Yet, as time passed, many of these cities were abandoned, and the Maya seemed to vanish from history. This disappearance has fueled countless theories and speculations. Why did the Maya leave their great cities? What happened to their civilization? These questions have led to a long-standing fascination with the idea that the Maya hold some secret knowledge, something that was lost when their cities fell into ruin. The truth, however, is far less mysterious. While some Maya cities were indeed abandoned, the Maya people did not disappear. Their civilization did not collapse in the way that many have imagined. Instead, they adapted to changing circumstances, and their culture persisted, even in the face of Spanish invasions and deadly diseases like smallpox. The idea of the Maya as a vanished civilization has been perpetuated by misunderstandings of what scholars call the collapse. In the 9th and 10th centuries, many of the city-states in the central Maya region experienced significant changes. Some cities were abandoned, and their ruins remain to this day. But the Maya people continued to live in other areas, and their culture evolved. Even after the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, bringing with them conquest and disease, the Maya survived. Their communities endured, and their traditions were passed down through generations. In more recent times, the fascination with Maya mysteries took on a new form with the rise of what some have called 212ology. This phenomenon was sparked by the belief that the Maya had predicted the end of the world on December 21, 2012. The idea gained widespread attention, fueled by movies, books, and websites. One of the most famous examples was the 2009 film 2012, which played on the fear that the Maya had foreseen a global apocalypse. The movie, while entertaining, was more about Hollywood spectacle than it was about Maya culture or prophecy. Yet, it tapped into a deep-seated belief that the Maya possessed secret knowledge about the fate of the world. The belief in a Maya-predicted apocalypse was based on a misunderstanding of their calendar. The Maya used a complex system of timekeeping, and the date 13.0.0.0.0 in their calendar did indeed correspond to December 21, 2012. But this date was not the end of the world. It was simply the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Maya scholars repeatedly explained that the ancient Maya had not predicted any kind of cataclysm, but the idea persisted, spreading through popular culture and media. Of course, the world did not end in 2012, and neither did the Maya. Their civilization, though often misunderstood, continues to thrive in many ways. Today, Maya communities still exist, and their culture remains vibrant. The fascination with their history, their art, and their supposed mysteries endures. But as we continue to explore what made the Maya who they were, it's important to remember that they are not just a people of the past. They are a living culture, with a rich history that stretches back thousands of years and continues to evolve today. The origins of the Maya civilization have long been a subject of fascination and debate. Archaeologists continue to uncover new evidence and reinterpret old findings, but the gradual emergence of the Maya can be traced through broad strokes. Around 9000 BCE, people began settling in the region. By 3000 BCE, maize farmers were clearing forests in the southern areas, laying the groundwork for what would become a thriving culture. Over the next millennium, a widespread village culture began to take shape, slowly transitioning toward urbanism. Settlements grew denser, and public structures, such as ball courts, became larger and more numerous. By the first millennium BCE, the shared cultural practices across the Maya region, spanning art, architecture, agriculture, and social organization, signaled the birth of what we now recognize as Maya civilization. As urbanism advanced during these pre-classic millennia, so too did the sophistication of Maya society. Artistic and architectural achievements flourished, and knowledge production reached new heights. One striking example of this progress was the creation of stelae, upright stone monuments placed in prominent urban spaces. These stelae were often adorned with carved and brightly colored portraits of rulers. As the Maya developed their hieroglyphic script, these monuments also began to feature texts, transforming them into both visual and written records. They served as signposts and backdrops for political rituals, performances, and parades, reinforcing the power and authority of the ruling elite. The architectural landscape of Maya cities became increasingly elaborate, with platforms, palaces, and pyramids dominating the skyline. This complexity was made possible by a highly hierarchical social structure. At the top of this hierarchy stood the ruler of the city-state, often depicted as a divine or semi-divine figure. Below the ruler were the nobles and lesser elites, followed by a merchant and artisan class. The majority of the population consisted of commoner families, primarily farmers, and at the very bottom of the social ladder were slaves. By the end of the pre-classic period, Maya society had developed into a multi-layered structure with 6 or 7 distinct social classes. But how did the Maya themselves understand the origins of their civilization? Like many societies around the world, the Maya did not have a single unified account of creation. Instead, their stories of cosmogenesis were deeply localized, often tied to the political interests of individual city-states. Each city frequently claimed that the world and its deities had been created locally, and residents believed that their patron gods were born in their own city. These localized myths served to legitimize the authority of the ruling elites and reinforce the city-state's identity. Our understanding of ancient Maya mythology and history, a blend of historical and mythological narratives, comes from 3 primary sources. 2 of these sources predate European contact, while the third originates from the colonial period. The pre-Columbian evidence includes visual culture, such as painted ceramics and murals, as well as hieroglyphic texts found on stelae, lintels, and monumental architecture. The colonial period sources include textual manuscripts written in various Mayan languages, which provide detailed accounts of ancient myths and histories. While these sources can be challenging to interpret, when combined, they offer a compelling picture of how the Maya viewed the supernatural creation of their world. One of the most detailed accounts of Maya creation comes from the Popol Vuh, a manuscript written in Quiche, a Mayan language spoken in the highlands of Guatemala. The surviving version of the Popol Vuh is housed in Chicago's Newberry Library and was transcribed in the early 1700s by a Dominican friar named Francisco Jimenez. This manuscript is believed to have been copied from an older Quiche text, which itself was likely based on a pre-Columbian codex. Unfortunately, the visual elements of the original codex were not preserved in Jimenez's version. The Popol Vuh is divided into 3 main sections, each reflecting its origins in multiple pre-Columbian sources. The first section is cosmogonic, detailing the creation of the earth and the birth of the gods. At the center of this creation story are 2 elderly deities, Tepeu and Guchumats, known as the Makers. These divine beings created the terrestrial world, brought light into existence, and populated the earth with animals. However, the gods desired beings who could venerate them, so they began the process of creating humans. Their first attempt involved crafting humans from mud and water, but these figures were fragile and dissolved in the rain. Next, they tried making humans from wood. While these wooden figures were more durable, they lacked the ability to speak and could not fulfill their ritual duties. Displeased, the gods destroyed them with a massive flood. The second section of the Popol Vuh is the longest and most famous. It recounts the adventures of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Aspalanque. Their story begins with the misfortunes of their father, Hunahpu, and his twin brother, Vukub Hunahpu. These earlier twins were passionate ball players, and their constant games disturbed the lords of the underworld, who resided in Xibalba, a realm beneath the earth. Annoyed by the noise, the lords of the underworld summoned the twins to play a ball game. The twins were ultimately defeated, and Hunahpu's head was severed and hung in a cornfield as a grim trophy. The tale takes an unexpected turn with the introduction of Blood Moon, the daughter of one of the lords of the underworld. Intrigued by the story of Hunahpu's severed head, she ventured into the cornfield to see it for herself. To her surprise, the head spoke to her and spat into her palm, miraculously causing her to become pregnant. This unconventional conception scandalized her family, and her father ordered her execution. However, the owl sent to carry out the deed took pity on her and allowed her to escape. To deceive her father, the owl returned with a ball of copal resin shaped like a human heart, convincing him that Blood Moon had been killed. The story of the hero twins and their eventual triumph over the lords of the underworld is a central theme in Maya mythology, symbolizing resilience, ingenuity, and the cyclical nature of life and death. Through these tales, the Maya wove a rich tapestry of myth and history, blending the divine and the human, the cosmic and the earthly, into a narrative that continues to captivate and inspire. The story begins with Blood Moon, a young woman who found her way to the home of Hunahpu. There, she approached his mother, Smukane, and revealed a startling truth. She was carrying Hunahpu's grandchildren, another set of boy twins. These children, destined for greatness, were born and raised in their grandmother's house. But they were not alone. Sharing the home were their older half-brothers, another pair of twins fathered by Hunahpu in the past. These older brothers, however, were far from kind. They were cruel and unkind to their younger siblings, often tormenting them. Yet, the younger twins, with their sharp wit and cleverness, eventually outsmarted their older brothers, transforming them into spider monkeys. As the younger twins grew, their intelligence and resourcefulness became evident. They had a remarkable ability to navigate both the human and natural worlds, using their cunning to overcome challenges. But their greatest test came during their teenage years. It was then that they stumbled upon their father and uncle's ball game equipment, hidden away in the rafters of their home. The discovery ignited a passion within them, and they became deeply engrossed in the game. This obsession, however, did not go unnoticed. The lords of Xibalba, the same underworld rulers who had once defeated their father and uncle, took note of the twins' activities. The lords summoned the boys to the underworld, subjecting them to a series of grueling trials designed to extinguish their spirits and end their lives. But the hero twins were not so easily defeated. Time and again, they outwitted the lords of Xibalba, relying on their intelligence and deep understanding of the natural world. Their resilience and cleverness carried them through each trial, and in the end, they triumphed over the lords of the underworld, securing their place as legendary figures in Maya mythology. The story of the hero twins is just one part of the Popol Vuh, a sacred text of the Quiche Maya. The final section of this text shifts focus, recounting the ultimate and successful attempt by the makers to create human beings. This time, humans were crafted from yellow and white cornmeal, a material that endowed them with the ability to speak, move, see, and think. These were the essential qualities needed for proper worship and veneration of the deities. From this creation emerged the lineages that would come to rule the Quiche Maya, extending their influence from the late post-classic period through the colonial era and into the time when the Popol Vuh was transcribed in the 18th century. This connection between the ruling elites and the cosmogonic narratives served to validate their political authority, a tradition deeply rooted in Maya culture. Although the surviving manuscript of the Popol Vuh dates to the mid-colonial period, evidence suggests that versions of this tale had been circulating for at least 2,000 years. As early as the first millennium BCE, the Olmecs, a civilization predating the Maya, created stone representations of twin boys at sites like Levanta. By around 300 BCE, artists at Izapa, a site in present-day Chiapas, carved stelae depicting key moments from the narrative. Later, during the Classic period, painted ceramics from the Maya lowlands and beyond continued to illustrate scenes from these ancient stories. One particularly famous ceramic vessel captures an early episode in the adventures of the hero twins. It depicts Hunahpu shooting Vukub Kakwix, or Seven Macaw, a proud and boastful deity. In this scene, the twins are shown with blowguns pressed to their lips, ready to strike. Seven Macaw, adorned with resplendent feathers, perches confidently, his jeweled teeth and eyes gleaming. According to the Popol Vuh, Seven Macaw had grown too arrogant, believing his dazzling appearance made him equal to the sun. Hunahpu was tasked with humbling him, and he succeeded by shooting him in the mouth, knocking out his golden teeth and shattering his lower jaw. This act not only diminished Seven Macaw's pride, but also provided an explanation for the unique shape of the macaw's lower mandible. This episode, immortalized by an ancient Maya artist on an elite ceramic vessel, serves as a powerful example of the moral lessons embedded in Maya mythology. Stories like this one often carried a deeper message, teaching the importance of humility and the dangers of placing individual pride above the needs of the community. These tales also offered explanations for the natural world, much like Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories would do centuries later. Nearly 1,000 years earlier, during the height of the Classic period, Maya artists had taken a different approach to recording their cosmogonic narratives. Instead of ceramics, they turned to stone, carving intricate hieroglyphic texts into massive panels. One of the most remarkable examples of this practice comes from the city of Palenque, where a series of inscriptions detail both mythological and historical events. These carvings, created during the reign of Kinich Khan Bahlam, the city's 13th ruler, are a testament to the Maya's dedication to preserving their stories. Following the death of his father in 683 CE, Kinich Khan Bahlam embarked on an ambitious building program that culminated in the creation of the Cross Group, a complex of 3 temple structures. Each temple was designed with a unique architectural style and adorned with artwork that reflected the ruler's vision. At the heart of each temple was a small sanctuary, housing large relief carvings that combined text and imagery. These carvings depicted Kinich Khan Bahlam interacting with his ancestors and detailed the creation of Palenque's patron deities, known as G1, G2, and G3. One particularly intriguing inscription refers to the temple as his, G1's, sweat bath. In Maya culture, sweat baths held significant religious and medical importance, often associated with childbirth and renewal. This connection between the temple and the act of creation underscores the profound spiritual significance of the site. Through these carvings and the architectural grandeur of the cross group, Kainich Khan Bahlam sought to solidify his legacy and link his rule to the ancient cosmogonic traditions of the Maya. By doing so, he not only honored his ancestors, but also reinforced the political and spiritual authority of his lineage. The stories of the hero twins, the creation of humanity, and the monumental inscriptions of Palenque all serve as reminders of the rich and complex world of the ancient Maya. These narratives, passed down through generations, continue to captivate and inspire, offering a glimpse into a civilization that valued both the power of storytelling and the enduring connection between the past and the present. The Maya civilization, with its intricate beliefs and profound connection to the cosmos, wove a tapestry of mythology and history that continues to captivate. Among their many traditions, the sweat baths and ceremonial structures held a special place, symbolizing divine birth and purification. These rituals were not merely acts of cleansing, but were deeply tied to the spiritual lineage of the Maya rulers. The hieroglyphic texts of Palenque, for instance, reveal a genealogy that seamlessly connects the city's human leaders to the patron gods they revered. This intertwining of the divine and the mortal underscored the sacred nature of their rule. The Maya also nurtured a unique vision of the world's creation, one that diverged from the later accounts found in the Popol Vuh. Their glyphs speak of the three hearthstones of creation, a cosmic event tied to the starting date of their long count calendar, August 11th, 3114 BCE. This moment marked the foundation of their universe, a point of origin that shaped their understanding of time and existence. From the northern reaches of the Maya world in the Yucatan Peninsula, another creation story emerges. This account, preserved in the books of Chilam Balam, offers a glimpse into the Maya cosmogenesis. These manuscripts, written in Yucatec Maya during the colonial period, were transcribed from hieroglyphic texts before many were lost to the flames of Spanish priests. Each town's version of the books of Chilam Balam, whether from Chumayo, Tizimin, or Mani, reflected local lore, historical memory, and even the influence of Christian ideas. Despite their differences, these texts shared a common thread: the story of a divine battle that reshaped the cosmos. In this tale, two powerful deities, Oxlahuntiku, he of the 13 gods, and Bolantiku, he of the 9 gods, clashed in an epic struggle. Bolantiku ultimately triumphed, tearing Oxlahuntiku apart and scattering his remains across the world. This act of destruction was followed by a great flood, wiping away the remnants of the old order. Yet, as with all cycles in Maya belief, destruction gave way to creation. 5 world trees were planted to raise the new sky, one in each cardinal direction, and a central tree to hold the heavens aloft. These trees became the pillars of the cosmos, supporting the celestial realm and marking the rebirth of the world. While the Maya placed the origins of their society in the distant past, archaeological evidence provides a clearer picture of their cultural emergence. The roots of Maya civilization can be traced back to the Middle Preclassic period, though humans had inhabited the region long before. Excavations at sites like Cuello reveal features such as clay floors and post holes dating to around 1200 BCE. Other sites, like Nakbi and Soconusco, may be even older, with evidence suggesting human activity as far back as 2000 BCE. During the Archaic period, which began around 8000 BCE, the region was home to nomadic bands who moved through the landscape, relying on seasonal camps for sustenance. The early pre-classic period marked a turning point with the advent of domesticated agriculture, particularly the cultivation of corn. This development allowed for the establishment of permanent settlements and the rise of social hierarchies. A key innovation during this time was the process of nixtamalization, in which corn was soaked and cooked in an alkaline solution. This not only made the corn easier to grind and more flavorful, but also unlocked its nutritional potential, providing dietary niacin. Combined with the amino acids from cultivated beans, this process ensured a balanced diet and supported the growth of Mesoamerican societies. By 1700 BCE, evidence of maize cultivation appeared in regions like Soconusco, where early villages began to take shape. These communities, sometimes referred to as the Mokaya, laid the groundwork for the cultural developments that would follow. In the Guatemalan and Chiapas coastal plains, remains of pole and thatch houses and a distinct ceramic tradition emerged during the Barra phase, dating from 1900 to 1700 BCE. Burial practices from this period also hint at social differentiation, with grave goods like mica mirrors suggesting the beginnings of a stratified society. Ceramic figurines depicting deities such as the corn and rain gods further indicate the early formation of Maya religious beliefs. As the Middle Pre-Classic period began around 1000 BCE, settlements became more widespread across the Maya region. Villages like Cuello in Belize consisted of clusters of house mounds, but evidence of monumental architecture also began to appear. Sites such as Ceibal in the northern lowlands demonstrate that the Maya were already constructing significant public structures during this time. By the end of the Middle Pre-Classic, around 300 BCE, towns across the region were embarking on ambitious architectural projects, signaling the transition to the late Pre-Classic period. The late Pre-Classic era was a time of cultural and social flourishing. Towns grew into cities, and monumental architecture became more elaborate. Excavations at sites like Caminal Juyu, now partially buried beneath modern Guatemala City, reveal the sophistication of Maya society during this period. San Bartolo, located in the Guatemalan lowlands, offers a glimpse into the artistic and religious achievements of the time, with its stunning murals depicting scenes of mythology and ritual. Meanwhile, El Mirador, near the Mexican border, stands as a testament to the grandeur of late Pre-Classic Maya civilization, with its massive structures and complex urban layout. Through these centuries, the Maya laid the foundations of a civilization that would endure for millennia. Their stories of creation, their innovations in agriculture, and their architectural achievements all speak to a people deeply connected to their world and the cosmos beyond. The echoes of their beliefs and accomplishments continue to resonate, offering a window into a culture that saw the divine in every aspect of life. The story of the ancient Maya is one of remarkable ingenuity, cultural depth, and profound connection to the natural and spiritual worlds. Among the earliest glimpses into their civilization is Caminal Juyu, a site with a history stretching back to at least 1500 BCE. At first, it was a modest village, but over time, it transformed into a thriving urban center. By the late Pre-Classic period, the city had developed a ceremonial core, marked by mounds and plazas that served as the heart of its social and political life. This period, often referred to as the Miraflores era by early archaeologists, saw the rise of monumental artworks, including stelae and altar thrones, many of which bore early hieroglyphic inscriptions. These inscriptions, along with the intricate iconography of the sculptures, reveal a society that had established a clear political and social hierarchy. Caminaljuyu was no longer just a settlement. It had become a city capable of supporting full-time artisans, architects, and other specialists. Its influence extended far beyond its borders, shaping the political, cultural, and economic landscape of the late pre-classic Maya world. The rulers of Caminaljuyu were not merely leaders, they were seen as semi-divine figures, individuals with privileged access to the gods and sacred knowledge. This concept of rulership, rooted in spiritual authority, would resonate across the Maya world for centuries, becoming a cornerstone of their political systems. While Caminaljuyu held sway in the Guatemalan highlands, the lowlands were dominated by another extraordinary site, El Mirador. Located in northern Guatemala, El Mirador was the largest city of the late preclassic period. By 300 BCE, it was part of a network of cities that included Sulnal, Calakmul, Tintal, Huacnal, and Nakbe. Together, these cities formed what some archaeologists consider the first political and economic state in the Western Hemisphere. El Mirador's history dates back to the 6th century BCE, but it reached its zenith around the 4th century BCE. Spanning an astonishing 38 square kilometers, it was the largest city in the pre-modern Western Hemisphere. Its scale and sophistication were unparalleled, with all the hallmarks of Maya civilization already in place. Raised roads, known as Sac-Biab, connected El Mirador to other cities in the region, facilitating trade and communication. Exotic goods like shells from distant coasts, obsidian from central Mexico, and jadeite from southern Guatemala flowed into the city, enriching its elite families. The city's agricultural system was equally impressive. Raised fields, or chinampas, provided sustenance for its population, while the Mayas' advanced understanding of mathematics, including the concept of zero, underscored their intellectual achievements. El Mirador's architecture stands as a testament to the ingenuity and vision of its builders. The city's most iconic structures, El Tigre and Danta, were monumental pyramids with triadic formations, 3 temples atop a single base. This design reflected the Mayas' cosmological beliefs, particularly the 3 stones of creation, a concept deeply embedded in their mythology. The Danta Pyramid, the largest of these structures, measured 600 by 330 meters at its base and rose 72 meters into the sky. Its construction required an estimated 2.8 million cubic meters of fill, a staggering feat of engineering. These pyramids were not just architectural marvels, they were also works of art. Covered in stucco and painted a vibrant red, they featured intricate sculptural reliefs. One such relief, created around 200 BCE, depicted jaguar paws and humanoid masks, blending mythological motifs with artistic expression. While El Mirador and Caminaljuyu offer insights into the grandeur of the Maya civilization, another discovery has reshaped our understanding of their early history. In the early 2000s, archaeologist William Saturno made a remarkable find at San Bartolo, Guatemala. Almost by accident, he uncovered the painted walls of a structure known as Las Pinturas, or the paintings. These murals, dating to around 300 BCE, have forced scholars to reconsider the timeline of Maya history, pushing back the dawn of the Maya by at least 2 centuries. The murals of San Bartolo are a window into a sophisticated and well-established ideological system. Originally, they adorned the upper sections of a small building's interior walls, though only portions of the northern, western, and eastern sections have survived. The paintings depict elaborate mythological scenes, rendered in vibrant reds and yellows, with details brought to life in black. These scenes form a continuous narrative, intertwining moments of creation with the enthronement of a ruler. They echo themes found in the Popol Vuh, an 18th century text that recounts Maya mythology, though the murals present their own unique interpretation. At the heart of the San Bartolo murals is the maize god, a central figure in Maya mythology. One scene shows the maize god receiving gifts from a mythological place known as Flower Mountain. The composition is anchored by the body of a serpent, whose open mouth forms the entrance to a cave. Kneeling before the cave, a woman offers a vessel of tamales to a male figure, who then turns to present a flowering gourd plant to the maize god. This deity, in turn, looks over his shoulder at two additional figures, their arms outstretched to receive the gourd. The maize god depicted in this scene bears a striking resemblance to earlier representations of a deity from the Olmec region, suggesting a long history of cultural exchange between the Maya and their neighbors to the west. The presence of such a scene in a minor temple, dating to 300 BCE, underscores the depth and complexity of Maya culture at this early stage. It reveals that many of the traits associated with the classic period, mythology, art, and social organization, were already well developed centuries earlier. The discovery of the San Bartolo murals has profound implications for our understanding of Maya history. It challenges the notion that their early history is shrouded in myth or prehistory. Instead, it reveals a civilization with a rich and documented past, supported by both textual and material evidence. The Maya were not just architects and artists, they were storytellers, mathematicians, and visionaries, weaving together the threads of their world into a tapestry that continues to captivate us today. 18 Rabbit, as he is often called by archaeologists, was a Maya prince who ascended to the throne of Copán on January 2, 695. His full name, Waxaclajun Uba Kawil, translates to 18 are the images of Kawil, though for simplicity, we'll continue to refer to him as 18 Rabbit. Upon becoming the Aja, or Supreme Lord, he took on the immense responsibilities of leadership, beginning with the funerary rites for his father. These rites included the construction of an elaborate temple, now known as the Esmeralda structure. This marked the beginning of a reign that would span 33 years, during which 18 Rabbit would oversee a vast network of vassal cities, manage intricate trade routes, and transform his capital city through ambitious urban projects. One of his most notable contributions to Copán was the Great Plaza, a ceremonial space adorned with 7 towering stone stelae, each bearing a larger-than-life portrait of the king himself. These monuments not only celebrated his rule but also served as enduring symbols of his power and divine authority. Under his leadership, Copán flourished as a center of culture, trade, and political influence, embodying the grandeur of the classic Maya period. But 18 Rabbit's reign, marked by energy and ambition, came to a sudden and dramatic end. In 738, he was captured in warfare by Ka'aka Tiliu Chan Yopat, the ruler of Quirigua, one of Copán's subordinate cities. On May 3rd of that year, 18 Rabbit was ritually executed, a shocking event that not only ended his life but also marked the decline of his dynasty's half-millennium-long dominance in the region. The story of 18 Rabbit offers a glimpse into the complexities of ancient Maya society during the Classic period, which spanned roughly from 250 to 950 CE. This era was characterized by remarkable advancements in writing, mathematics, astronomy, and art, all of which were closely tied to the institution of Maya rulership. Kings like 18 Rabbit were not merely political leaders, they were seen as divine figures, Huhul Ajau, or divine kings. Their authority was believed to stem from their direct lineage to the gods who had created the universe. As such, they were thought to wield control over both the natural and supernatural realms, ensuring the survival and prosperity of their people. The Maya civilization was organized into city-states, each ruled by its own dynasty. These royal centers were hubs of political, religious, and cultural activity, and their rulers often commemorated significant events in their lives with inscriptions on monuments. Thanks to the Maya's sophisticated calendrical and writing systems, we can date many of these events with astonishing precision, often down to the exact day. The Maya calendar, particularly the long count system, played a crucial role in this precision. Developed during the late pre-classic period, the long count is a linear system of timekeeping that begins on a mythical date corresponding to August 14, 3114 BCE. From this starting point, time was measured in cycles, with each cycle consisting of progressively larger units. For example, 20 days, or kayans, made up a weinal. 18 weinals formed a ton, 360 days, and so on, culminating in the Baktun, a period of 144,000 days. This system allowed the Maya to record dates spanning thousands of years, a feat unmatched by most other ancient civilizations. The widespread use of long count dates on monuments began in the 3rd century CE, marking the onset of the Classic period. These inscriptions not only recorded historical events, but also reinforced the divine authority of the rulers who commissioned them. The ability to inscribe one's deeds in stone was a powerful tool for legitimizing rule and ensuring a legacy that would endure for generations. The Maya calendar's sophistication and its association with cycles of time have also fueled modern misconceptions, most notably the so-called 2012 phenomenon. This global fascination with the idea of a Maya-predicted apocalypse stemmed from a misunderstanding of the long count calendar. The calendar's 13th Baktun, which ended on December 21, 2012, was interpreted by some as a prophecy of the end of the world. However, this interpretation was far removed from Maya beliefs. The roots of this misconception can be traced back to the 1990s, when a preliminary reading of a glyphic text from the site of Tortuguero mentioned the date 13.0.0.0.00, corresponding to December 23, 2012. The text was initially interpreted as predicting a period of blackness, which some took to mean an apocalyptic event. However, further analysis revealed that the inscription referred to a building dedication, not a prophecy. Scholars clarified that the Maya did not view the end of a Baktun as the end of the world, but rather as the conclusion of one cycle and the beginning of another. Despite these clarifications, the idea of a Maya apocalypse captured the public imagination, fueled in part by Western fascination with mysterious endings and apocalyptic scenarios. This fascination has deep historical roots, dating back to the arrival of Franciscan missionaries in the 16th century. These missionaries, driven by millenarian fervor, believed that converting the Maya to Christianity was essential for the second coming of Christ. Elements of this apocalyptic ideology were absorbed by the Maya elite and found their way into colonial-era texts like the books of Chilam Balam. Centuries later, these texts were misinterpreted by proponents of the 2012 phenomenon as evidence of ancient Maya apocalyptic beliefs. In reality, the Maya were far more concerned with the cyclical nature of time and the continuity of their civilization than with apocalyptic endings. Their calendar, with its intricate cycles and vast temporal scope, reflected a worldview that emphasized renewal and the interconnectedness of all things. The story of 18 Rabbit, his rise to power, and his dramatic fall is but one chapter in the rich and complex history of the Maya, a civilization that continues to captivate and inspire us to this day. The Maya civilization, with its intricate understanding of time and space, left behind a legacy that continues to fascinate. Among their most remarkable achievements was their system of recording time, a method that intertwined the celestial and the terrestrial, the linear and the cyclical. Maya artists often depicted a vertical column of numbers, each attached to a hieroglyph, to signify the divisions of what we now call the long count. This system allowed them to record dates with extraordinary precision. For instance, a date corresponding to 637 CE in our calendar would appear as 9.10.5.0.0 in theirs. This notation represented 9 baktuns, 10 katuns, 5 tons, and no winals or keens, counting from a starting point in 3114 BCE. Such a system not only allowed the Maya to chart time with unparalleled accuracy, but also enabled modern scholars to correlate their calendar with our own, offering a glimpse into a civilization that valued chronology and history in ways unmatched by other Amerindian cultures. In addition to the long count, the Maya, like many Mesoamerican cultures, used a cyclical calendar known as the calendar round. This system was composed of 2 interlocking cycles, the Tzolk'in and the Hab. The Tzolk'in was a 260-day cycle, formed by pairing 13 numbers with 20-day names, creating a rhythm that repeated every 260 days. The Hab, on the other hand, was a solar calendar of 365 days, divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with an additional short month of just 5 days. These 2 cycles ran concurrently, and it would take 18,980 days, roughly 52 years, for the same combination of Tzolk'in and Hab to repeat. Maya scribes recorded these dates with a combination of numerical symbols and glyphs, each representing specific days and months. The records left behind by the Maya reveal a civilization deeply attuned to the rhythms of life and nature. Their focus was not on apocalyptic endings, as some modern interpretations might suggest, but on cycles of fertility, growth, and renewal. They were captivated by the constancy of time, the permanence of place, and the intricate connections between the natural and supernatural worlds. For the Maya, these realms were not separate but intertwined, forming a unified existence of people, animals, ancestors, and deities. By the 3rd century CE, during what is known as the Classic Era, the Maya had established fully developed polities, often likened to city-states. Each polity revolved around a central capital city, surrounded by a network of dependent towns and villages. These smaller settlements were bound to the capital through economic relationships, providing tribute in the form of food, goods, and labor. In return, the capital offered a protection from external threats and famine, creating a sacred bond between the center and its periphery. This relationship was personified by the divine king, who was seen as the guardian of this reciprocal arrangement. As the Classic period progressed, the cultural and architectural achievements of the Maya reached new heights. Innovations that had begun in the pre-Classic era became more refined and standardized. One of the most notable architectural features of this time was the corbelled vault, a type of modified arch made from overlapping stone blocks. These vaults were used to create interior spaces in a variety of structures, from domestic buildings to grand temples perched atop towering pyramids. As these pyramids grew taller, architects employed corbelled vaults and elaborately plastered roof combs to enhance the grandeur of the temples, making them appear even larger and more imposing. City planning also evolved during this period. Earlier, more organic layouts gave way to carefully ordered spaces, often centered around open plazas surrounded by monumental buildings. These plazas became focal points for communal gatherings and ceremonial events. The few surviving architectural paintings from this era reveal a vibrant artistic tradition, with Maya artists experimenting with new pigments, intricate compositions, and lifelike representations of the human form. At the same time, their hieroglyphic writing system reached its zenith, becoming one of the most sophisticated forms of written communication in the ancient world. The great cities of the classic era, Copán, Tikal, Calakmul, and Palenque, stand as testaments to the Mayas' architectural and cultural prowess. These cities were not merely places of residence or governance. They were embodiments of the ruling dynasty's power and divine authority. The monuments, carvings, and inscriptions that adorned these cities served to glorify the ruling family, particularly the divine king, who was seen as the living personification of the state. In many cases, the names of the kingdoms themselves were derived from their ruling dynasties. For example, in the northern Yucatan, kingdoms like Sehpec and Canpec were named after the Pech family, while Tutulxu and Kupul bore the names of their respective rulers. This tradition of naming kingdoms after dynasties extended back at least a millennium, as evidenced by the southern lowland kingdom of Caracol, known as Kayanul, a name later echoed in the Yucatec state of Canul during the colonial period. The urban landscapes of the Maya were as diverse as they were distinctive. Features like corbelled vaults, stepped pyramids, ball courts, palace complexes, and expansive plazas made these cities unmistakably Maya, yet no two were exactly alike. Each city reflected the unique characteristics of its environment, as well as the vision and priorities of its rulers, architects, and artists. These cities were not static. They evolved over centuries, shaped by the interplay of tradition and innovation, the demands of their inhabitants, and the aspirations of their leaders. In the end, the Maya civilization was a tapestry of interconnected elements: time and space, nature and the divine, the individual and the collective. Their achievements in architecture, art, and astronomy were not isolated feats, but part of a broader worldview that sought to harmonize the earthly and the celestial. Through their calendars, cities, and stories, the Maya left behind a legacy that continues to inspire wonder and curiosity, a testament to their enduring vision of a world in balance. The Maya world, a realm of intricate civilizations and profound cultural achievements, was not an isolated one. Throughout its history, the Maya region experienced periodic interactions with peoples from the West, particularly from what we now call Central Mexico. These interactions came in many forms: traders passing through, refugees seeking safety, or at times invading forces. Yet, these encounters did not diminish the unique identity of the Maya. Their civilization was not imported or imposed. It was born from the land itself, a distinct and locally developed culture. However, the Maya were not immune to outside influences. They absorbed elements from other cultures, weaving them into their own, enriching their traditions and shaping their development. One of the most significant episodes of such cultural contact occurred in the 4th century, involving the great metropolis of Teotihuacan. This city, which began to rise around the turn of the millennium, grew over the next several centuries into the most impressive urban center the Americas had ever seen. By its peak, Teotihuacan was home to over 100,000 people, possibly even twice that number, spread across a sprawling cityscape of well-organized neighborhoods. Its monumental avenues and towering pyramids, still standing today, remain a testament to its grandeur and are among Mexico's most visited landmarks. The extent of Teotihuacan's influence is not fully understood, but its size, wealth, and the militaristic themes in its art suggest it held considerable power. By the 4th century, elements of Teotihuacan's artistic style began to appear in the Maya world, hinting at a growing connection between the two regions. In some cases, these interactions were likely economic or diplomatic. Around 400 CE, several Maya city-states in highland Guatemala formed alliances with Teotihuacan, possibly becoming trading partners. These southern Maya cities may have served as vital links in the trade networks of the northern metropolis. Archaeological evidence of this cultural exchange is striking. At Caminaljuyu, a prominent city in the highlands, a sudden shift in architectural style marks the influence of Teotihuacan. The monumental structures of this period, referred to as the Esperanza style, reveal a blending of Maya and Teotihuacan traditions. Maya architects adopted the talud tablero design, a hallmark of Teotihuacan construction. This style, characterized by slanted planes, the talud, supporting flat panels, the tablero, became a defining feature of the city's acropolis. Additionally, burials at Caminaljuyu included ceramic vessels unmistakably crafted in the Central Mexican style, adorned with motifs and techniques unique to Teotihuacan. Among these were depictions of deities, such as the storm god later known to the Aztecs as Tlaloc. Further north, in the lowland cities of Tikal, Huaxactun, and La Sufricaya, another story of cultural fusion unfolded. Here, a hybrid culture blending Maya and Teotihuacan elements emerged, often referred to as Zacol, after its distinctive ceramics. This cultural shift can be traced to a specific moment in history, January 16, 378. On that day, Tikal's ruler, Chak Tok Ichaaktaris, known as Great Jaguar Paw, met his end. His death was almost certainly violent, as it coincided with the arrival of a figure named Sihyaj Kaak, or Fire is Born. This event is recorded on stelae from both Tikal and neighboring Huaxactun, marking a turning point in the region's history. Sihyaj Kaak quickly established a new order in Tikal, installing a young ruler named Yax Nuun Ahiin, or First Crocodile, on the throne. Stela 4, a monument commemorating this new ruler's accession, portrays him in a style heavily influenced by Teotihuacan. He is depicted frontally, a departure from traditional Maya artistic conventions, and adorned with symbols of Central Mexican origin, such as a pecten shell necklace and imagery of the rain deity. Yet, the carving also incorporates distinctly Maya motifs, blending the two traditions into a unique synthesis. Some scholars have speculated that Yax Nuun Ahiin may have been a son of Teotihuacan's ruler, sent to establish a dynasty in Tikal. Whether or not this is true, his lineage went on to rule the city for nearly 2 centuries. Other nearby centers, such as Huaxactun, also appear to have accepted rulers with ties to Teotihuacan. During this period, trade between central Mexico and the central Maya region flourished, with goods and ideas flowing between the two cultures. Evidence of Teotihuacan's influence even extends to the Yucatan Peninsula, where early classic carvings and artifacts in the Puuc region bear traces of Central Mexican styles. Teotihuacan's reach was not limited to the north. Its influence extended southward to the city of Copán, where, In 426, a new dynasty was founded by Kainich Yaks Kaukmo, or Great Son Quetzalcoatl. This ruler, who arrived from the west, established one of the most celebrated dynasties in Maya history. Archaeological excavations of his tomb and those of his successors reveal strong ties to Teotihuacan. Yet, despite these connections, Yaks Kaukmo was deeply rooted in the Maya world. Bone analysis suggests he grew up in the Petén region near Tikal, and the dynasty he founded was unmistakably Maya. Over the centuries, his lineage ruled Copán with great distinction, leaving a legacy that endured until the early 9th century. While Copán's relationship with Teotihuacan may have been indirect, the connection between the Petén region and the central Mexican city was more immediate. However, this bond began to unravel as Teotihuacan's power waned in the 6th century. Around this time, a significant shift occurred in the Maya political landscape. Caracol, a city-state allied with Tikal, switched allegiances to join Calakmul, a rival power. In 562, Caracol attacked and sacked Tikal, a devastating blow to the city. Meanwhile, Teotihuacan itself faced decline, and by the end of the century, the once mighty metropolis had been sacked. The story of Teotihuacan and the Maya is one of connection and transformation. It is a tale of two great civilizations meeting, influencing one another, and leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. Through trade, diplomacy, and even conflict, they shaped each other's histories, creating a rich tapestry of cultural exchange that echoes through the ages. The Maya civilization, often celebrated for its towering temples, intricate glyphs, and celestial observations, was also a society deeply intertwined with the realities of warfare. For much of the 20th century, scholars painted a picture of the Maya as peaceful stargazers, their rulers imagined as priest-kings who rarely, if ever, engaged in conflict. But as the secrets of their glyphs were unraveled in the latter half of the century, this perception shifted dramatically. The Maya, it turned out, waged war as frequently as many other societies of their time. Warfare was not an anomaly in their world. It was a thread woven into the fabric of their lives. To the Maya, war was not merely about destruction. It was a ritualized, highly orchestrated affair. The primary goal of warfare was to capture. Victory was celebrated when an enemy king or war captain was seized, a moment immortalized in glyphic inscriptions. Success was also marked by the symbolic taking of shields and flint weapons, the burning of city centers, and the deliberate smashing and burial of monuments. These acts were not random. They were steeped in ceremony, a testament to the deeply ritualistic nature of Maya warfare. Captives, once taken, were often subjected to elaborate rituals. Some were tortured, as depicted in the vivid murals of Bonampak, where prisoners are shown with their fingernails freshly extracted. Others were forced into a grim spectacle, playing a ball game where their death was the predetermined outcome. Stripped and adorned with paper, some captives were prepared for public decapitation. In the haunting words of inscriptions found across multiple sites, there were times when the blood pooled, the heads piled up. These acts, brutal as they may seem, were part of a larger narrative, a performance of power, sacrifice, and divine will. Yet, warfare was not just a force of division among the Maya. It also served as a binding agent, connecting city-states through a complex web of rivalry, alliances, and shared history. Consider the kingdoms of Piedras Negras and Yaxchilan, two powerful polities situated along the Usumacinta River, a natural boundary that today separates Guatemala and Mexico. The story of their relationship is one of trade, intermarriage, and periodic conflict, a dynamic that spanned centuries. Yaxchilan, founded in the 4th century, grew into a formidable city-state. For much of its history, it maintained a delicate balance with its neighbors, including Piedras Negras, located just 30 miles downriver. But by the late 7th century, the balance had tipped. Piedras Negras held the upper hand, and Yaxchilan's king, Shield Jaguar III, found himself subordinate to the dominant city's ruler. This was a time of population growth, and with it came increased competition, not just for control of trade routes, but also for access to fertile land. The tension between the two cities escalated, leading to the construction of fortified border towns and defensive walls. Smaller city-states in the region were drawn into the conflict, forced to align with one side or the other. In 742, Shield Jaguar III was succeeded by a ruler so overshadowed by Piedras Negras that his existence is known only through a single monument in the rival city. This ruler's time on the throne was marked by subjugation, a period of humiliation for Yaxchilan. But in 752, the tide began to turn. Bird Jaguar IV, a son of Shield Jaguar III, ascended to the throne. Determined to restore his city's honor, he erased almost all records of his predecessor's reign and set about strengthening Yaxchilan's defenses. Over the following decades, he waged relentless warfare against Piedras Negras, a campaign that culminated in a dramatic victory. In 808, Yaxchilan's king, Tatbu Skull III, captured the ruler of Piedras Negras, a moment of triumph that was soon followed by the sacking of the rival city. One might expect such a victory to herald a golden age for Yaxchilan, a time of peace and prosperity under its divine kings. And for a brief moment, it seemed that this might be the case. The fortified frontier between the two cities was abandoned, and the border towns fell into decline. But the forces that had driven the conflict, population pressures, competition for resources, did not simply vanish. Instead, they combined with the destabilizing effects of prolonged warfare to undermine the very system of divine kingship that had fueled the Mayas' political and military ambitions. The captured king of Piedras Negras was the last of his line to be commemorated on a monument. And though Tatbu Skull III had achieved a remarkable victory, he too would be the last divine king of Yaxchilan. The city, once a beacon of ceremonial and political power, began to fade. Its people dispersed, and its influence waned. The era of divine kingship, so central to the classic Maya world, was drawing to a close. Warfare, in the end, was both a unifying and a destructive force. It bound regions together through shared struggles and rivalries, sustaining the divine king system that defined the classic period. But it also sowed the seeds of that system's collapse. In the central Maya area, where the divine kings flourished most spectacularly, two periods of intense warfare bookended their reign. One in the 3rd century, marking their rise, and another in the 9th and 10th centuries, signaling their fall. The story of Maya warfare is not one of endless violence, nor is it one of idyllic peace. It is a story of balance, of a civilization that wove conflict into its culture, using it to build alliances, assert power, and, ultimately, to define itself. Yet, as with all things, the balance could not hold forever. And, in the end, the very forces that had once sustained the Maya's divine kingship would conspire to bring it to an end. Lady Cable, known as Water Lily Hand, was a remarkable figure in the history of the ancient Maya. She was a queen of the Cayanu, or Snake Dynasty, which ruled from the powerful city of Calakmul. Her story, pieced together through the decipherment of hieroglyphs and the discovery of artifacts, offers a glimpse into the complex and often overlooked roles of women in Maya political and religious life. With each new discovery, the narrative of Maya rulership shifts, challenging the traditional focus on kings and instead highlighting the concept of divine monarchy, where queens like Lady Cable held extraordinary power and influence. One of the most enduring images of Lady Cable comes from a carved stela, known as Stela 34, dated to 692 CE. Though the artifact was looted and damaged before scholars could fully study it, the surviving glyphs have provided invaluable insights. This stela, originally paired with another depicting her husband, stood as a monumental testament to her rule. Together, the sculptures were placed before a grand pyramid mound, serving as royal portraits that immortalized their reign over the city of El Peru Waka. Lady Cable's marriage to Kainich Bahlam II, a nobleman of lesser status from a local family, was a strategic alliance. Together, they governed El Peru Waka, a vassal city under the influence of Calakmul. However, it was Lady Cable who held the highest title, Ix Kalumte, or Lady Supreme Warlord. This title, rarely bestowed, has been identified in only a handful of other Maya queens. It signified her unparalleled authority, and some scholars have even speculated that she may have led warriors into battle against Calakmul's rival, the powerful city of Tikal. Lady Cable's legacy extended far beyond her lifetime. She passed away sometime between 702 and 711 CE and was laid to rest in the city's largest pyramid mound, known as Structure M13-1. Her burial was a reflection of her status, with a masonry crypt filled with elite grave goods. Among these were intricately worked jade pieces, elaborately decorated pottery, and a ceramic plate painted to resemble a warrior's shield. For 2 centuries after her death, her tomb became a site of reverence. Maya petitioners left offerings such as crafted trinkets, whistles, and shells, transforming her resting place into a shrine that honored her memory and influence. Interestingly, Lady Cable's prominence in El Peru Waka was not diminished by her non-local origins. In fact, her status as a member of the Kayanul dynasty may have elevated her position, solidifying the alliance between Calakmul and El Peru Waka. Her husband, while a ruler in his own right, did not share the same level of recognition. The stela depicting him, which once stood alongside hers in the city's main plaza, lacked the 3-dimensional craftsmanship that characterized her portrait. This artistic choice ensured that Lady Cable's image remained visually dominant. She was also depicted wearing a lattice-beaded jade dress, a garment associated with the male maize deity, further emphasizing her unique role in Maya society. The Maya worldview often emphasized the complementary nature of male and female roles, particularly in rituals and ceremonies. This belief extended to rulership, where kings and queens were seen as interdependent rather than hierarchical. Lady Cable's attire and the iconography surrounding her suggest that her role was not merely symbolic but integral to the political and religious fabric of her time. Her story challenges modern assumptions about gender roles in ancient societies, revealing a more nuanced and balanced approach to leadership. As we reflect on Lady Cable's life, it becomes clear that her influence was not an anomaly, but part of a broader pattern in Maya history. Women of high status played critical roles in governance, religion, and even warfare. Their contributions, once obscured by time and the limitations of early scholarship, are now coming to light, reshaping our understanding of Maya civilization. The Maya civilization, with its breathtaking cities, intricate glyphs, and stunning art, has long captured the imagination of scholars and the public alike. These achievements, spanning thousands of years, stand as a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the Maya people. Yet, this dazzling legacy has also shaped a somewhat skewed perception of their world. Much of what we know has been filtered through the lens of the elite, the noble families who commissioned the grand stone buildings and the art that immortalized their lives. To truly understand the Maya, however, we must look beyond the grandeur and consider the daily lives of the non-elite, the ordinary families who formed the backbone of this remarkable civilization. For the average Maya family, life revolved around simple, single-room homes. But these homes were not isolated or confined. Maya society did not have a concept of family as we understand it today. Instead, kinship extended broadly, encompassing multiple generations, relatives by marriage, and even fictive kin. This expansive view of family was reflected in the way homes were arranged. They were often clustered around patios or small plazas, outdoor spaces that were just as central to family life as the interiors. These clusters of homes formed what we might think of as neighborhoods, where extended families lived and worked together. Children in these communities grew up surrounded not only by their immediate family, but also by cousins, grandparents, and other relatives. Their upbringing was deeply communal, with a strong emphasis on shared responsibilities and relationships. As they reached puberty, boys and girls underwent important rites of passage. One such ceremony, observed by 16th century Spanish friars, was likened to a form of baptism. For girls, these rituals marked their readiness for marriage, after which they typically remained at home. Boys, on the other hand, often left their homes temporarily to be trained in skills such as hunting, trading, or even playing the ball game. Adolescence for young men was a celebrated phase, a time of preparation and transition into adulthood. Gender roles in Maya society, as in many other cultures, were marked by a double standard. Girls were raised with strict expectations of chastity and obedience, and their marriages were arranged by their parents and lineage elders. In many cases, marriage served to strengthen ties between different lineages, as it was taboo to marry within one's own patrilineage, or chibal. Boys and men, however, enjoyed greater freedom. While adultery was officially forbidden and could carry severe consequences, men were permitted to visit prostitutes and, if they had the means, take multiple wives. Polygamy, in fact, was a marker of status among the elite. A person's identity within Maya society was closely tied to their lineage. The Chibal surname, inherited from one's father, was a key marker of social standing. In 16th century Yucatan, there were around 250 such patrilineages, and their names carried significant weight, persisting even through the upheavals of colonial rule. While paternal descent was paramount, maternal lineage also played a role, particularly in marriage arrangements and economic activities. Women, for instance, often passed down property inherited from their mothers, and their work, such as weaving, was central to the household economy. For the elite, lineage was even more critical, as it determined social rank and access to wealth. Royal families, in particular, traced their ancestry with great care, often linking themselves to the gods to legitimize their power. At the other end of the social spectrum, commoners and slaves were less defined by their ancestry and more by other markers, such as their birth date, which determined their calendrical name, or by nicknames and occupational labels. Slavery in the Maya world was not as widespread as in some other societies, and there is little evidence of a formal slave trade before the arrival of the Spanish. Most slaves were likely commoners captured in battle, with elite captives either held as hostages or ritually executed. Some criminals were also condemned to slavery, according to colonial sources. However, the institution of slavery among the Maya was relatively limited, compared to what would later be introduced by European colonizers. In death, the Maya returned to their roots, both to their lineage and to the homes where they had lived. Commoners were often buried beneath the floors of their houses, a practice that mirrored the more elaborate tombs of the elite. While a royal burial might involve a grand temple and treasures of immense value, a commoner's grave was far simpler. Yet, the underlying concept was the same: to honor the deceased and provide them with items they cherished in life. These might include a jade bead, small carved statues, or a ceramic vessel, sometimes inscribed with the owner's name. For scribes and priests, hieroglyphic books were sometimes included in their burials, a testament to their role in preserving Maya knowledge and culture. In some cities, alternative burial practices were observed. For instance, cremation or the mummification of heads was practiced in certain elite contexts, such as at post-classic Mayapan. However, these methods were rare and reserved for those of high status. For the majority of the Maya, burial customs were modest but deeply meaningful, reflecting their connection to family, community, and the land. Through these glimpses into daily life, we see a Maya world that was as much about the ordinary as it was about the extraordinary. The grand temples and intricate carvings may dominate our imagination, but the true heart of Maya civilization lay in its people, their relationships, their traditions, and their enduring connection to the world around them. The Maya world was a place of striking contrasts, a land that seemed at first glance inhospitable to human civilization. To the north, there stretched a riverless scrub forest. In the center, dense tropical rainforests dominated, and to the south, volcanic mountain ranges rose dramatically. It was an environment that might have discouraged settlement, let alone the rise of a complex and enduring civilization. Yet, against all odds, the Maya thrived here. At their peak, their population may have reached as many as 10 million people. These were not just subsistence farmers eking out a living. Maya society supported a vibrant minority of individuals who built towering cities, carved intricate monuments, painted vivid murals, crafted fine goods, traded across vast distances, and ruled over sophisticated polities. How did they achieve this in such a challenging environment? The answer lies in their remarkable relationship with the land. Some scholars argue that the Maya's success stemmed from their agricultural achievements, while others emphasize their ability to adapt to the rainforest, whether through crop farming, forest gardening, beekeeping, or the cultivation of fruit trees. The Maya developed ingenious methods of food production and distribution. These systems operated almost entirely at local or regional levels, without the oversight of a centralized imperial authority. Yet, their relationship with the environment was not without its challenges. Natural disasters, droughts, hurricanes, floods, and volcanic eruptions could wreak havoc. At times, human activity, such as overfarming, overpopulation, or the disruptions of warfare, exacerbated ecological crises. Still, these periods of failure were exceptions, highlighting the overall resilience of a system that sustained millions for centuries. At the heart of Maya life was maize, a crop so essential that it held a sacred place in their mythology. To the Maya, maize was more than food. It was a divine gift. The domestication of maize began in southern Mexico and the Maya region, and by at least 4,000 years ago, they were cultivating it. Over time, they refined its genetics, creating larger cobs and higher-yielding varieties. They also developed innovative preparation techniques, such as the nixtamal process, which made the grain more nutritious. These advancements were pivotal, enabling the transition to larger, denser settlements and laying the foundation for the rise of Maya cities. By the pre-classic period, maize cultivation was widespread across the Maya region. It was complemented by other staples like beans, squash, chili peppers, root crops, and fruits. Salt, another essential resource, was either produced locally, such as through salt boiling in southern Belize, or acquired through trade. The massive salt beds of Yucatan's northern coast were particularly important. In the flat, riverless Yucatan Peninsula, access to water was a constant challenge. Towns were often built near cenotes, natural sinkholes that provided reliable water sources. Farmers also constructed wells, canals, and reservoirs to manage water. The region's trade networks facilitated the exchange of goods, including cotton, beeswax, honey, and cacao. While cacao groves were more common in areas like Tabasco, Belize, and Guatemala's Pacific coast. The Yucatan's cotton had a long history of cultivation and was a valuable trade commodity. In the rainforest regions, the Maya demonstrated a deep understanding of their environment. They recognized the importance of maintaining the natural diversity of the forest. By avoiding practices like over-farming, excessive clearing, or monocropping, they ensured a steady and varied food supply. Even in densely populated areas like Tikal, where the population may have reached several 100,000, forest removal was limited to about 60%. When the trees were cleared, the process was selective. Fruit trees, for instance, were carefully preserved. Over time, this approach created what some have called an artificial rainforest, a curated landscape that balanced human needs with ecological sustainability. In these regions, water control was a critical concern. Maya engineers developed sophisticated techniques, including raised fields, terracing, and hydraulic systems, to manage water resources effectively. While it might be tempting to view the Maya as early environmentalists, their approach was more pragmatic than ideological. They balanced innovation and resource use with a respect for the environment that ensured long-term sustainability. This philosophy extended beyond agriculture to include animal husbandry and hunting. Dogs were domesticated, with some breeds raised for food and others used in hunting. Turkeys were both bred at home and hunted in the wild. The Maya were also skilled beekeepers, raising native stingless bees, particularly in the Yucatan. Hunting provided additional resources with deer, peccary, armadillos, and various birds forming part of their diet. Fishing was widespread, from lagoons and rivers to the Caribbean coast, where commercial fisheries operated. The rainforest's rich biodiversity offered a wealth of resources, from jaguars and ocelots to rabbits, tapirs, and boars, which were used for food, clothing, tools, and ornaments. Through ingenuity and adaptability, the Maya turned a challenging environment into the foundation of a flourishing civilization. Their story is one of resilience, creativity, and a profound connection to the land that sustained them for centuries. The animals of the Maya world were more than just a source of sustenance. They were woven into the very fabric of daily life and belief. monkeys, tropical birds, and other creatures were not only part of the Maya diet, but also central to their understanding of the world around them. These animals shaped the way the Maya viewed life, their connection to nature, and even their social structures. For instance, the rare and vibrant quetzal bird, with its striking feathers, was a symbol of nobility and royalty. To wear its feathers was to announce one's elevated status. But the connection between animals and social hierarchy went deeper. Scholars have studied the bones and teeth of the Maya, analyzing strontium isotope levels, and found that the elite consumed more deer and better cuts of it than those of lower rank. Beyond the physical, animals also bridged the Maya to their mythology and the supernatural. Their stories of human origins and the divine were filled with creatures like monkeys, birds, and serpents, each playing a role in the cosmic narrative. These animals were not just part of the natural world, they were part of the spiritual and historical identity of the Maya people. For years, scholars puzzled over how the Maya, with their relatively small kingdoms and limited resources, managed to sustain such dense populations. The answer, it seems, lies in their remarkable ability to adapt to their environment. Unlike empires that centralized power, the Maya thrived through a decentralized system. Each city-state operated independently, yet they shared a common culture. This allowed them to trade ideas and resources, spreading knowledge about agriculture and other practices across regions. When some city-states, like Tikal, Calakmul, and Karakol, attempted to dominate others and form small empires, they eventually failed. Their downfall highlighted the strength of the Maya's decentralized approach, which allowed them to flourish in diverse environments. The cities of the Maya were as complex and dynamic as their culture. Over the years, scholars have debated the nature of Maya urbanism. Were their cities merely ceremonial centers, restricted to the elite? Or were they bustling hubs of political, social, and economic activity? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, though closer to the latter. Maya cities were vibrant places, with elevated plazas at their centers. These plazas could be closed off when needed, sometimes for defense but often to control access to the spaces where the ruling elite lived. Yet, these city centers were not entirely off-limits to the common people. There were many reasons for an ordinary Maya man or woman to venture downtown. The cities were connected by straight, raised causeways called sac-biob, linking central plazas to neighborhoods and nearby towns. These neighborhoods were not defined by walls or streets, but by focal points like water sources, small temples, plazas, and ball courts. Socially, they were shaped by lineage and craft specialization, though they were not always homogeneous. Wealth differences existed within neighborhoods, just as they did between them. In this way, Maya cities resembled modern urban centers more than previously thought, with population densities reaching up to 3,000 people per square kilometer. Daily life in these cities was a web of movement and interaction. Domestic servants and slaves walked from their neighborhoods to work in the homes of the elite. Skilled laborers traveled to construction sites where they built and decorated the grand pyramids and palaces. Traders brought their goods to market, and buyers followed. Markets, often roofed and located near central plazas, were essential to every Maya city. Porters carried food and animals, while musicians arrived with their instruments for festivals and rituals. These events, along with ball games, drew large crowds from surrounding areas. Whether visiting the city daily or for special occasions, the Maya encountered both familiar faces and strangers, as their cities were large enough to make such encounters unremarkable. The open plazas of Maya cities were more than just spaces for gathering. They were stages for cultural expression. Public dances, poetry recitations, and musical performances filled these spaces, often as preludes to ball games. Classic-era art depicts musicians parading in sequences, with maraca players, singers, trumpeters, turtle-shell rattlers, and drummers all taking their turn. Royal courts likely had their own composers and orchestras whose skill was celebrated by both the elite and the common people. Similarly, the athletic prowess of ball players, who could bounce rubber balls off their hips and through stone hoops, was a source of admiration and pride. One of the most defining cultural practices of the Maya was the Mesoamerican ball game, known to them as pits. While the exact rules of the game remain a mystery, and likely varied over time and between regions, its significance is undeniable. Players competed to send rubber balls through vertical stone hoops, using only their hips and other parts of their bodies, never their hands or feet. The game was more than a sport. It was a cultural, political, and religious event. The architectural evidence of its importance is striking. Ball courts were a common feature in Maya cities, often located in ceremonial centers or along the southern edges of major urban areas. These courts came in various formats, but most were long rectangular fields bounded by stone walls. Some courts had a T-shaped design with one end zone, while others were I-shaped with two. The courts were often separated from nearby pyramids by open plazas, which were designed with seating for spectators. Auxiliary temples sometimes flanked these spaces, emphasizing the game's spiritual significance. Stone carvings adorned the walls, hoops and markers of the courts, depicting scenes of the game and its players. In the city of Copán, the ball court held a place of prominence, sitting at the very heart of the city. It separated the Acropolis from the Great Plaza, a space designed by the ruler known as 18 Rabbit. This central location underscores the game's importance, not just as entertainment, but as a vital part of Maya life and identity. The ball game was more than a pastime. It was a reflection of the Maya worldview. It brought together elements of competition, ritual, and community, creating a shared experience that resonated across social classes. Whether as players or spectators, the Maya participated in a tradition that connected them to their ancestors, their gods, and each other. It was a reminder of the intricate web of relationships between people, nature, and the divine that defined their world. The Spaniards first arrived on the coasts of the Yucatan Peninsula in 1517, stepping into a world that was already rich with history, culture, and complexity. At that time, according to a parish priest named Francisco de Cárdenas y Valencia, there was an emperor ruling over the region, a man named Tutul Xiu, who resided in the heights of Mani. Writing in 1643, Cárdenas y Valencia described this ruler as a figure of great importance, one who governed the Indians of the area. He claimed that Tutul Xiu had a deep desire to meet the Spaniards, whom the Maya referred to as the bearded sons of the sun in their ancient books of prophecies and pagan beliefs. The priest's account painted a picture of Tutul Xiu as a man eager to fulfill ancient predictions, much like Moctezuma of the Aztecs, who had supposedly anticipated the return of bearded lords. According to Cárdenas y Valencia, Tutul Xiu welcomed the Spaniards with veneration and respect, even expressing a willingness to embrace Christianity. This narrative, however, was far from accurate. It was, in fact, a romanticized and deeply flawed interpretation of events, one that Spaniards clung to for generations as a justification for their invasions, conversions, and colonization efforts. In reality, Tutul-Xiu, like many indigenous leaders of the time, did not see the Spaniards as divine figures or fulfillers of prophecy. Instead, he viewed them as invaders, foreigners to be dealt with cautiously and, when necessary, accommodated. Tutul-Xiu was indeed a significant figure, a halak wenik, or true man, who ruled over a small regional kingdom based in Mani. But his domain was just one of many. At the time of the Spanish arrival, the Yucatan Peninsula was divided into roughly 18 independent kingdoms. There was no unified Maya empire, and in fact, there never had been. Yet, the Maya were no strangers to the concept of empire. Their history was marked by encounters with powerful forces from beyond their borders. To the north, in central Mexico, empires had risen and fallen for centuries. Teotihuacan, with its monumental architecture, and later Tula, had both extended their influence into the Maya world, sending envoys and possibly even establishing outposts. By the early 16th century, the Aztec Empire, centered in Tenochtitlan, had begun to push into the Maya frontier. An Aztec invasion of the Maya region seemed inevitable, likely under the rule of Moctezuma himself. But history took a different turn. In 1519, the Aztec Empire faced an invasion of its own, this time by the Spaniards. The fall of the Aztec Empire in 1521 did not shield the Maya from the reach of Spanish ambitions. On the contrary, it marked the beginning of a new wave of invasions. Over the next 2.5 decades, the Spaniards, often accompanied by large numbers of indigenous warriors from former Aztec territories, launched a series of campaigns into Maya lands. These invasions were marked by extreme violence, mass enslavement, and the gradual expansion of Spanish control. In some ways, it could be said that an Aztec invasion of the Maya did occur, albeit one carried out under the banner of Spanish conquest. Despite these efforts, the Spanish incursions into the Maya world were neither swift nor complete. The Maya, with their decentralized political structure and deep-rooted resilience, could not be easily subdued. Their world was not one that could be entirely overrun or controlled, even by the combined forces of Spanish and indigenous armies. The invasions of the 16th century, whether viewed as Spanish conquests or as more complex Spanish Mesoamerican campaigns, were protracted and left much of the Maya world intact. To understand the Maya of this era, it is helpful to look back at the terminal Classic and post-Classic periods, times of both transition and innovation. In the northern Yucatan, 3 city-states, Uxmal, Coba, and Chichen Itza, rose to prominence. These cities flourished culturally and expanded politically, even as the great cities of the central Maya regions experienced decline during the so-called collapse. From the 8th to the 11th centuries, much of the northern Yucatan likely fell under the influence of one or another of these 3 powers. The rulers of these city-states, known as Kuhul Ajawab, or divine kings, continued to wield authority, as evidenced by monuments celebrating leaders like Lord Chak of Uxmal. Yet, the political landscape was dynamic, with shifting alliances and fortified border sites reflecting ongoing competition. This period also saw the development of distinct artistic and architectural styles. The cities of the Puuc region, including Uxmal, were known for their intricate stone mosaic facades, multi-story palaces, and grand arches, features that set them apart from other Maya regions. Cultural practices evolved as well. While the polytheism of the classic Maya endured, the art of the post-classic period placed greater emphasis on deities rather than political leaders. This shift may indicate changes in the political system. In Yucatan, the once divine status of the Kuhul Ajau gave way to a more collective form of governance. Councils of lineage heads, known as multipal, played a significant role in decision-making. These councils met in a popolna, or mat house, rather than bowing before a single ruler in a throne room. This system, which tempered the authoritarianism of earlier periods, likely had its roots in the time when Uxmal, Chichen Itza, and Coba vied for dominance. Trade and connectivity were also central to the Maya world during this time. The expansion of the Sac-Biab, or whitewashed causeways, was a notable development. These raised roads linked capitals to outlying towns, defensive zones, and trade hubs, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and ideas. Chichen Itza and Coba, in particular, invested heavily in these networks, which archaeologists continue to uncover today. The Maya of the post-classic period were a people of innovation and adaptation, navigating a world of shifting power dynamics and external pressures. Their story is one of resilience, creativity, and complexity, a story that continued to unfold even in the face of the profound challenges brought by the arrival of the Spaniards. The ancient city of Chichen Itza holds a story that is as intricate as the carvings on its stone walls. Recent advancements in technology, like LIDAR surveys, have revealed a network of white roads, or Sac-Biab, that was far more extensive than previously imagined. These roads, both within the city and connecting it to others, were a hallmark of the post-classic Yucatan. Chichen Itza alone had at least 30 of these pathways, a testament to its significance and connectivity in the region. But it is not just the roads that make Chichen Itza remarkable. Its art and architecture have long puzzled and fascinated scholars. The city's central layout, adorned with colonnaded halls, Atlantean columns, and stone skull racks, speaks of a culture deeply influenced by military themes. Feathered serpent imagery and carvings of warriors in Toltec-style headdresses and armor further hint at a connection to the Toltec Empire, which rose to prominence in central Mexico during the 10th century. The Toltec capital, Tula, flourished until its decline around 1160, and during this same period, Chichen Itza reached the height of its power, dominating much of northern Yucatan. The parallels between these two civilizations have sparked endless debate. Were they allies, trading partners, or was one the conqueror of the other? For a long time, the prevailing theory was straightforward. It was believed that the Toltecs had invaded Yucatan, establishing Chichen Itza as a regional capital and introducing their distinct artistic styles and political practices. Among these practices were the highly ritualized public executions, or human sacrifices, that were a hallmark of central Mexican empires like the Toltecs and later the Aztecs. This narrative was supported by folk histories from both regions. Toltec legends tell of a king named Quetzalcoatl, or Feathered Serpent, who fled Tula in 987. Similarly, Yucatec Maya traditions speak of an invader named Kukulkan, also meaning Feathered Serpent, who arrived in Yucatan between 967 and 987 and made Chichen Itza his capital. The symmetry of these stories is compelling, but they were recorded during the colonial period, a time when indigenous traditions were influenced by Spanish and Christian cultures. As such, they may reflect a blending of histories rather than a clear account of events. Modern scholars have begun to challenge the idea of a Toltec conquest. Instead, Many now believe that the similarities between Chichen Itza and Tula were the result of sustained economic and cultural exchange rather than military domination. Trade routes likely connected the two regions, fostering a relationship that may have been solidified through dynastic marriages and diplomatic ties. This interaction could explain the unique blend of Maya and Toltec elements in Chichen Itza's art and architecture, a style that celebrated the city's political regime while remaining fundamentally Maya at its core. Like Tula, Chichen Itza eventually fell. For years, it was thought that the Itza people, for whom the city is named, were responsible for its downfall. However, it is now believed that the Itza dynasty ruled Chichen Itza during its peak, and that their overthrow came at the hands of rival lineages. Forced to flee, the Itza migrated south, establishing a small kingdom near Tikal. This new settlement, known as Petén Itza, or the province of the Itza, endured until the Spanish conquest in 1697. In the aftermath of Chichen Itza's decline, northern Yucatan entered a period of political fragmentation. Eventually, a new city-state, Mayapan, rose to prominence. Some accounts suggest that Mayapan was founded by an Itza lord named Kukulkan, though this may be a myth designed to legitimize the city's authority. By 1283, the Kokam lineage had established dominance in Mayapan, governing through a multipal system, a collective form of leadership rather than the centralized rule of a single king. The city itself was a more modest version of Chichen Itza, with simplified pyramids and palaces. Over time, Mayapan grew into a walled city with over 2,000 buildings and a population of 10,000 to 15,000. While most residents were local, skeletal remains suggest that a small number came from other parts of northern Yucatan. Mayapan's dominance lasted until the mid-15th century, when internal rivalries erupted into civil conflict. The Xiu lineage, based in Mani, staged a coup against the Kokam, reportedly massacring many members of the ruling family. However, the Xiu were unable to fully consolidate power or maintain control over the region. Instead, the Yucatan Peninsula fragmented once more into a patchwork of small kingdoms. Among these, the Xiu controlled a wealthy domain, while the Kokam retained a smaller one. Their rivalry persisted for another century, intertwining with the broader history of the Spanish invasion. The story of Chichen Itza, Mayapan, and the shifting powers of the Yucatan is one of resilience and transformation. It is a tale of connections between cities, cultures, and peoples that shaped the region's history in ways that continue to captivate and inspire. During the centuries spanning the 9th to 16th, a period known as the Terminal Classic through the Post-Classic, the Maya world witnessed the rise and fall of numerous city-states. Across this vast region, a pattern emerged: the development of distinct regional cultures within the broader framework of Maya civilization. These cultures were shaped by a blend of local traditions and external influences, often from other Maya regions or even central and southern Mexico. Among the many regions that flourished during this time, two stand out for their unique contributions: the eastern coast, stretching from modern-day Cancun to Belize, and the highlands of Guatemala. Along the eastern seaboard of the Yucatan Peninsula, a series of small kingdoms thrived, beginning as early as the 13th century. These included the island of Cozumel to the north and the river valley cities of Belize, such as Lamanai. These coastal polities may have benefited from the relative stability provided by the Mayapan hegemony, a dominant force in the region during its time. However, even after the dissolution of Mayapan in the mid-15th century, many of these kingdoms continued to flourish. Sites like Tulum and Santa Rita in the Yucatan, as well as larger cities in Belize, were still vibrant when the Spanish arrived. Remarkably, some of these communities endured well into the 17th century. The Maya of these coastal and riverine kingdoms were not seafaring in the traditional sense, but they were adept navigators of the waterways. They traveled along rivers, lagoons, and the sheltered sea routes provided by the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef, which stretches over 500 miles from Cancun to Honduras. It was along these routes that the first recorded encounter between the Maya and Europeans likely occurred. In 1502, during Christopher Columbus's fourth voyage, a large canoe laden with trade goods was spotted traveling south along the Belizean coast. This canoe, manned by 24 Maya traders, marked the beginning of a new and tumultuous chapter in their history. The artistic traditions of these coastal kingdoms were as distinctive as their geography. Religious temples in the region were adorned with mural paintings that shared a unique style. These artworks were characterized by a departure from naturalistic depictions of the human form and the extensive use of Maya blue, a vibrant turquoise pigment renowned for its durability in the tropical climate. Despite its regional uniqueness, this artistic style has been referred to by some scholars as the international style. This term reflects its apparent connections to artistic innovations in central Mexico, particularly the codex artistry of the Mixteca Puebla region. While the exact nature of this influence remains unclear, it underscores the cultural exchanges that linked even the most distant corners of Mesoamerica. In the highlands of Guatemala, the story was similar yet distinct. The kingdoms of this region, including the powerful Quiche, were geographically closer to Mexico and its successive empires. It is uncertain whether these highland city-states had direct contact with the Toltecs or if their interactions were mediated through Chichen Itza. Nevertheless, the highland Maya maintained economic and cultural ties with both Tula and Chichen Itza during their peak. Later, they would establish diplomatic and trade relations with the Aztecs, further demonstrating their interconnectedness with the broader Mesoamerican world. The governance of the Quiche and their neighboring kingdoms bore similarities to the multipal system that had developed in post-classic Yucatan. The Quiaches were ruled by an Ajaw, or king, who shared power with a king-elect. Both leaders worked alongside counselors who represented influential lineages and the towns or neighborhoods under their control. This system allowed for a balance of power and reflected the deeply rooted traditions of Maya political organization. During the 15th century, the Quiche kingdom expanded its influence across much of the highlands. However, this dominance was challenged when the city-state of the Kaqchikel revolted and regained its independence. By the time the Spanish arrived in 1521, the highlands were home to a patchwork of polities. The Quiche were the largest, but they were joined by medium-sized kingdoms like the Kaqchikel and Mam, as well as smaller city-states such as the Tz'utujil. These communities shared cultural traditions, common origins, and often familial ties. Yet, they were also divided by the rugged terrain, linguistic differences, and long-standing political rivalries. These divisions would later complicate Spanish efforts to establish control over the region. The arrival of the Spanish marked the beginning of a protracted and violent conflict. In 1521, the highland Maya learned of the fall of Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, to Spanish and Nahua forces. Recognizing the potential implications of this power shift, the Quiche and their neighbors sent envoys to the newly conquered city. This act prompted Hernán Cortés to dispatch a military company to the Maya highlands, led by Pedro de Alvarado. The force included 300 Spaniards, over 6,000 Nahua allies, and thousands of other Mesoamerican warriors and support personnel. In 1524, Alvarado's forces launched an assault on the Quiche kingdom, devastating its capital city of Utatlan. The Quiche's king and king-elect were captured and executed, burned alive as a grim display of Spanish dominance. The invaders then turned their attention to the neighboring Cachiquel towns and the small lakeside kingdom of the Tzutujil, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Alvarado established the Cachiquel city of Iximché as the new colonial capital, renaming it Santiago. From this base, the Spanish sought to subdue the surrounding Maya region. Alvarado, confident in his success, wrote to Cortés to announce the conquest. Yet the struggle for control of the highlands was far from over, and the Maya would resist Spanish rule for decades to come. The conquest of the Maya was far from the swift and decisive victory often imagined. Instead, it was a prolonged and tumultuous series of events, marked by violence, resistance, and the resilience of a people who refused to be entirely subdued. When Pedro de Alvarado set out to establish a new colony and Christian kingdom in the highlands of Guatemala, his ambitions were grand. Yet, the reality of his campaign was far from the vision he proclaimed. His forces swept through the region, leaving devastation in their wake. They dismantled local political structures, sowed terror among Maya families, and pitted the Quiche, Cachiquel, Tzutujil, and other Maya kingdoms against one another. What Alvarado called pacification was, in truth, a wave of slaughter, enslavement, famine, and disease. The chaos he unleashed spread far beyond the reach of his armies, destabilizing the region and leaving scars that would endure for generations. By 1526, Alvarado had abandoned the highlands, leaving the task of conquest to his brother Jorge, who returned the following year with an even larger force. The Maya kingdoms, already weakened by the first invasion, were unable to mount a unified resistance. This second wave of violence allowed the Spanish and their allies to establish a more permanent foothold. Yet, even then, the conquest was incomplete. Sporadic warfare and unrest persisted well into the 1540s, and the colonial province that emerged was limited in scope. Large swaths of the Maya region, including much of the central area and the Yucatan Peninsula, remained beyond Spanish control. Independent Maya polities continued to thrive, defying the invaders and maintaining their autonomy. One notable attempt to establish a peaceful colony was the founding of La Vera Paz, or the True Peace, in the northern highlands. This settlement, established in 1537 by Bartolomé de las Casas and other Dominican friars, was an effort to create a community based on cooperation rather than conquest. However, the friars' good intentions were no match for the demands of Spanish settlers, who exploited Maya labor and resources. When the Maya resisted, their actions were labeled as rebellion, providing justification for further violence and enslavement. By 1556, La Vera Paz had collapsed, another casualty of the relentless pressures of colonization. The wars of conquest in Guatemala mirrored the broader struggles between the Maya and the Spanish across the region. These were not swift campaigns, but drawn-out conflicts characterized by repeated invasions and fierce resistance. The Spanish relied heavily on non-Spanish warriors, including allied Maya and other Mesoamerican groups like the Nahua, to bolster their forces. Even with this support, their colonies remained relatively small and precarious. In many areas, Their efforts to conquer the Maya outright failed, leaving numerous independent polities to persist along the unstable colonial frontier. The first major clash between the Spanish and the Maya occurred in 1517 on the beaches of the Yucatan. This battle, though recorded by the Spanish as a costly victory, was in reality a significant triumph for the Maya. A third of the Spanish force was killed, including their leader, and the survivors retreated to Cuba, abandoning their plans to press further into the region. This early encounter set the tone for the decades of conflict that followed, as the Maya repeatedly demonstrated their ability to resist and adapt to the challenges posed by the invaders. The final chapter of this 30-year struggle unfolded in 1547, with the conclusion of the third major invasion campaign in the Yucatan. Led by the three Franciscos de Montejo, father, son, and nephew, these campaigns were marked by overconfidence and miscalculation. One particularly striking example of this hubris was the founding of Ciudad Real, a colonial capital established in the heart of the abandoned city of Chichen Itza. The Spanish believed they had secured the cooperation of the surrounding Maya kingdoms, but this illusion was shattered when the Maya launched a coordinated attack, driving the invaders out of the peninsula. While most of the conquest events occurred between 1517 and 1547, the story did not end there. Independent Maya kingdoms continued to resist Spanish control well into the 17th century. The unconquered zone, which the Spanish sometimes referred to as uninhabited, grew in size, stretching between the colonies of Yucatan in the north and Guatemala in the south. The largest of these independent polities, the Itza Kingdom of the Petén, remained untouched by Spanish forces until 1697. Even after this, pockets of Maya resistance endured. In eastern Yucatan, Maya communities not only survived, but briefly threatened to reclaim the entire peninsula during the caste war of the 1840s. Remarkably, the final subjugation of an independent Maya polity did not occur until 1933, when a Hispanic-led force attacked the village of Tzula in southeast Yucatan. Given this history, it becomes clear that the idea of a singular Spanish conquest of the Maya is misleading. The Maya were never fully conquered. Instead, they navigated a complex and evolving relationship with the invaders, employing strategies of resistance, adaptation, and accommodation. Over the centuries, their civilization transformed, shaped by both internal resilience and external pressures. The story of the Maya is not one of defeat but of survival and continuity, a testament to their enduring strength and ingenuity. The Maya resistance to Spanish conquest was a story of complexity, resilience, and deeply rooted cultural dynamics. Unlike the swift conquests seen in other parts of the Americas, the Maya Wars stretched on for decades, even centuries, defying the expectations of the Spanish invaders. This prolonged struggle raises an important question. Why was the conquest of the Maya so drawn out and fragmented, rather than a straightforward campaign of domination? Early historians, particularly those from Mexico and the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries, offered explanations that reflected their own biases. One common argument was that the Maya regions lacked the gold and silver that had lured conquistadors to other territories. Without the promise of immediate wealth, the Spanish were less motivated to focus their efforts on the Maya. Another explanation, rooted in the prejudices of the time, blamed the Maya themselves. Some historians, echoing the complaints of the conquistadors, described the Maya as stubborn and resistant, accusing them of prolonging the conquest through their defiance. The Spanish, including figures like Cortés, often lamented the Mayas' boldness in battle, describing them as a bellicose people who inflicted significant harm on their forces. These frustrations were echoed by those who founded cities like Mérida, who complained of the many battles they were forced to fight just to gain entry into Maya lands. By the 17th century, the narrative had shifted further, with Spanish chroniclers like the Franciscans Cárdenas y Valencia and Diego López de Cogolludo painting the Maya in an even darker light. They described them as diabolical cannibals, recounting gruesome tales of Spanish captives being sacrificed and consumed. One such story claimed that 2 Spanish conquistadors captured in the failing colony of Champotón were sacrificed to Maya idols and then eaten, with certain body parts kept as relics. These accounts, however, were steeped in exaggeration and fear, reflecting more about the Spanish mindset than the reality of Maya culture. In truth, there is no credible evidence to suggest that the post-classic Maya were cannibals, or that they engaged in ritual slaughter on the scale often depicted in popular culture. While the Maya did ritually execute war captives, criminals, and other offerings, such practices were not unique to their society. Ritual executions have been a part of nearly all human cultures at some point in history. The tendency to exoticize and sensationalize Maya rituals as uniquely violent or religiously extreme is a distortion. Maya society was no more violent than other cultures of its time, nor was it less. To understand the prolonged nature of the Maya-Spanish Wars, it is essential to view them through the lens of Maya political and military culture. Unlike the centralized empires of the Aztec or Inca, the Maya were never politically unified. Around 1500 CE, the Maya region was home to as many as 40 independent polities, each with its own rulers, rivalries, and identities. Some of these divisions were relatively shallow, stemming from short-term disputes between ruling families. Others ran deeper, rooted in differences of language and community identity. Gaspar Antonio Chi, a Maya noble who later served as an interpreter for the Spanish, described the fractured state of the region at the time of the conquest. He noted that the provinces were already divided, with each one acting as an enemy to the other. Battles were frequent, with warriors painted in black stripes, a symbol of anticipated grief. The Spanish sought to exploit these divisions, hoping to pit one Maya polity against another, much as they had done with the Aztec and Inca. In some cases, this strategy worked. In highland Guatemala, for example, the Alvarado brothers capitalized on old rivalries among the Quiche, Kaqchikel, and Tzutujil peoples. But in other regions, such as eastern and southeastern Yucatan, the strategy faltered. The Montejo cousins and Alonso Davila faced disastrous campaigns in the late 1520s and early 1530s, as Maya leaders manipulated the invaders, sending them into hostile territories where they were left wounded, disoriented, and vulnerable. The Maya resistance was not just a story of defiance, but also one of strategic complexity. Their ability to navigate the chaos of invasion, leveraging both internal rivalries and the weaknesses of their enemies, speaks to a culture that was as resourceful as it was resilient. The story of the Maya during the Spanish invasions is one of resilience, adaptation, and deeply rooted traditions. In the north, the rivalries among the Xiu, Kokam, and Pech leaders played a pivotal role in shaping the early colonial landscape. These rivalries, which predated the arrival of the Spanish, were leveraged by the Montejo family to establish the city of Mérida at Tijo in 1542. Yet, these same divisions also ensured that the colonial province would face significant challenges in the years to come. The persistent animosity between these dynasties and the northeastern Maya kingdoms created a fragile foundation for the Spanish foothold in the region. However, the Spanish strategy of exploiting Maya political divisions often had unintended consequences. Turning neighboring Maya polities against one another frequently deepened existing enmities, sparking regional warfare that delayed or even derailed colonization efforts. For instance, the Alvarado family's manipulation of the rivalry between the Quiche and Kaqchikal peoples in the highlands led to 2 decades of brutal violence. The scars of this conflict lingered long after, leaving a legacy that arguably still affects the region today. Similarly, the so-called Great Maya Revolt of 1546-47, which marked the culmination of 2 decades of violent invasions in the Yucatan's northeast, did not expand the Spanish frontier as intended. Instead, it solidified the existence of a frontier that would persist for centuries. In areas like southern Quintana Roo and Belize, the Spanish conquest ultimately failed, and this failure proved to be permanent. The Maya employed a variety of tactics to resist the Spanish, often with remarkable effectiveness. They abandoned towns, fled battlefields, and feigned submission, only to strike back when the opportunity arose. Ambushes were a favored strategy, particularly in confined spaces where the Spanish could not easily deploy their horses or firearms. These tactics frustrated the Spanish, who often accused the Maya of duplicity and treachery. Conquistadors like Alonso Davila denounced the Maya as deceitful, claiming their offers of friendship were made with malicious intent. The city council of Mérida in 1543 described Maya resistance as organized treacheries and conspiracies. Yet, from the Maya perspective, these were traditional methods of resistance, honed over centuries and adapted to the new challenges posed by the Spanish. These strategies of resistance did not end with the 16th century. In the centuries that followed, Maya communities continued to adapt and find new ways to confront the challenges of colonization, and later, the pressures of the modern world. Their story is one of survival, ingenuity, and an enduring connection to their history and traditions. The Maya civilization, often celebrated for its ancient achievements, is frequently viewed through the lens of its pre-contact history, particularly the 1,000 years surrounding the Classic period. This era, rich with monumental architecture, intricate hieroglyphs, and advanced astronomical knowledge, has captivated archaeologists and historians for centuries. Yet, the story of the Maya did not end with the so-called collapse of the Classic period, nor did it vanish with the arrival of Europeans. The Maya persisted, adapting and enduring through centuries of profound upheaval. Since the 16th century, the Maya peoples have faced relentless challenges. Invasion, displacement, and cultural disruption have marked their history on an unprecedented scale. Today, no independent Maya states exist. The lands once home to their great cities and kingdoms are now divided among 5 nations: Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. These modern states have often treated their indigenous populations with indifference at best and violence at worst. Maya communities have endured waves of genocidal violence from the early days of European contact in the 1520s to the brutal conflicts of the 1980s. Despite these hardships, the Maya people remain. Their numbers today are comparable to those of a millennium ago, yet their proportion of the global population has diminished significantly, from an estimated 3% in ancient times to less than 0.2% today. Furthermore, many Maya now live far from their ancestral lands, with significant populations in central Mexico and the United States. Centuries of intermarriage with Europeans, other indigenous groups, and African-descended peoples have further complicated the definition of what it means to be Maya. Some might question whether those of partial Maya descent or those living abroad can still claim this identity. Yet, the history of migration and cultural blending is not unique to the Maya. It is a shared experience among indigenous peoples across the Americas. The right to claim an indigenous identity, in whatever form it takes, is deeply personal and deserving of respect. Understanding the Maya today requires grappling with a paradox. 5 centuries of destruction and survival, erosion and persistence. Their history since European contact is often divided into 4 overlapping periods. First came the Conquest period, marked by Spanish invasions. This was followed by the colonial era, which lasted from the 16th century to the 1820s. Next came the period of independent republics, stretching from the 1820s to the present day. Finally, the modern age of tourism and globalization began in the 1970s. While these divisions provide a useful framework, they are rooted in colonial and national narratives that often obscure the Maya perspective. The Maya story is not solely one of victimization. It is also a testament to their adaptability, resilience, and the enduring diversity of their regional cultures. One way to understand the Maya experience during these centuries of colonization is to examine their struggles for autonomy. The Spanish invasions of the 16th century, often referred to as the Maya-Spanish 30 Years' War, did not result in a comprehensive conquest of the Maya. Instead, the outcome was a fragmented landscape of small Spanish colonial provinces. This archipelago of provinces mirrored the political organization of the Maya before the Spanish arrived, with its array of small kingdoms, city-states, and independent polities. Despite the upheaval brought by European newcomers and the devastating impact of new diseases, this fundamental political pattern remained largely intact. Of the Spanish provinces established in the Maya region, only 2 proved to be both permanent and relatively prosperous. The first was Yucatan, encompassing the northwest of the peninsula, and the second was Guatemala, centered in the southern highlands. Many other Spanish campaigns failed, and by the early 17th century, most colonial outposts in the Maya area had been abandoned or reduced to nominal status. In the more remote regions, such as the southwest, southeast, and northeast corners of Yucatan, Maya towns saw only occasional visits from Spanish officials or priests. In some areas, like what is now Quintana Roo and Belize, even these sporadic visits ceased entirely. Here, Maya communities, such as those in the city of Lamanai, continued to practice their own unique blend of Maya and Christian traditions, largely free from outside interference. The Spanish colonial strategy often involved consolidating scattered Maya villages into centralized towns. This required the construction of new urban centers, many of which were built atop the ruins of pre-Columbian cities. In the northwest of the Yucatan Peninsula, the Franciscan order oversaw the creation of dozens of such towns, while the Dominican order led similar efforts in the highlands. These new towns were designed according to the laws of the Indies, a set of regulations first established in the Caribbean in 1512. Each town was centered around a plaza and a monastic complex, with Maya laborers and artisans playing a crucial role in their construction. This echoed the communal efforts of religious construction in the pre-Columbian era. These urban spaces became the focal points for Spanish Catholic evangelism and cultural assimilation. Open-air courtyards, known as atriums, hosted catechism lessons, language classes, rituals, and other communal events. In some cases, these efforts succeeded in fostering a sense of civic pride among Maya communities. The resulting form of Catholicism was uniquely Maya, blending Christian teachings with indigenous beliefs and practices. Despite these efforts, much of the Maya region remained beyond Spanish control well into the 17th century. Independent Maya kingdoms and polities continued to thrive, and the boundaries between these territories and Spanish provinces were often fluid. In some cases, the Maya even regained ground. The kingdom of the Itza, centered in the Petén region, the heartland of the ancient Maya civilization, expanded during this period. This trend of Maya resurgence was only reversed gradually and within the broader context of Spanish and British imperial rivalries. The story of the Maya is one of remarkable resilience. Through centuries of colonization, displacement, and cultural transformation, they have maintained their identity and adapted to changing circumstances. Their history is not merely a tale of loss, but also one of survival, creativity, and enduring strength. In the 1660s, the British established a logging settlement at the Laguna de Terminos, located on the Gulf coast of southwest Yucatan. Despite repeated Spanish attacks, the settlement endured until 1716. For the Maya villagers caught in the crossfire of this conflict, the consequences were devastating. Many were enslaved by the British, vanishing into the vast and brutal Atlantic slave system. Others were forcibly relocated into Spanish-controlled Yucatan, often by Spanish forces or colonial Maya militias. After 1716, the British shifted their focus to the Belize River, on the opposite side of the peninsula's base. Over the course of the 18th century, as British loggers pushed further upriver and expanded to adjacent waterways, they drew increasing Spanish hostility. In response, Maya communities retreated further inland, away from the coast. Independent Maya polities either disappeared entirely or were reduced to smaller, more isolated groups. Despite these pressures, the Maya never completely abandoned the Belize region, even though the British often claimed the area was uninhabited. By the late 19th century, Maya populations in the region began to recover, bolstered by migration from Yucatan and Guatemala. Meanwhile, in 1697, Spanish forces overran the Itza kingdom in the Petén region, leading to a significant decline in the Maya population there throughout the 18th century. During this colonial period, Maya militias were formed to help defend Spanish territories from British incursions and pirate attacks. However, these militias were also used against independent Maya groups, highlighting the complex and often contradictory roles the Maya played within the Spanish Empire. The very existence of these militias hints at the degree of autonomy that Maya communities managed to retain. Unlike the Spanish settler minority, which governed itself through its own officials in a system known as the República de Español, the Maya were allowed to govern themselves at the local level under a parallel system called the República de Indígenas. This system, however, had its limitations. Maya elites were excluded from holding regional political power, at least officially. Instead, they were often relegated to the role of intermediaries, tasked with collecting tribute and organizing labor for the colonial authorities. The encomienda system, which required Maya towns and villages to provide unpaid or underpaid labor to designated Spaniards, was officially abolished in Spanish America before the Maya-Spanish Wars had even ended. Yet, in practice, the system persisted in Maya territories well into the 18th century. despite these challenges, local councils composed of men from long-standing elite lineages continued to govern Maya communities. These councils often retained the same titles, responsibilities, and privileges that their ancestors had held in pre-colonial times. Maya communities during the colonial era were not insular. They often welcomed migrants of mixed race or African descent, even though Spanish laws officially prohibited such integration. For instance, a small but steady stream of Afro-Yucatecan men moved into Maya villages, particularly in rural Yucatan. By the late 18th century, these communities had become, in racial terms, Afro-Maya. Similar patterns occurred in Guatemala, though the specifics varied between the highlands and the Pacific coast. In most cases, these newcomers adopted Maya lineage names, learned the local language, and worked as corn farmers. The strength and rootedness of Maya municipal communities allowed them to absorb these newcomers while maintaining their cultural identity. Prominent within these communities were the Adzibob, or notaries, who were the heirs to the ancient Maya tradition of writing. These notaries used a slightly adapted version of the Roman alphabet to write in Mayan languages. Their work was crucial in maintaining community autonomy. They recorded land titles, filed lawsuits, submitted petitions, and engaged with the colonial legal system in various ways. Petitions, whether praising or criticizing specific Spanish officials and priests, often requested reductions in tribute or labor demands. These documents traveled from Yucatan and Guatemala to the viceroy in Mexico City, and even to the king in Spain. Some petitions were written in Mayan, others in Spanish, and occasionally in Nahuatl, the language of the Nahua warriors who had accompanied the Spanish during the Maya-Spanish 30 Years' War. The early 20th century saw the rise of a narrative that the Spanish, particularly the Franciscan friar Diego de Landa, had destroyed all Maya books and codices. While it is true that Landa's 1562 campaign against idolatry led to the public burning of many books and effigies, this was not the end of Maya written traditions. Community elders continued to safeguard and copy such works for centuries. Spanish priests, in their own writings, described finding and destroying these books, though a few were kept as curiosities. Unfortunately, only a handful of these books survived to the present day. One notable example is the Madrid Codex, an accordion-fold manuscript believed to have been brought to Spain by Don Pedro Sánchez de Aguilar, a priest and conquistador's son in the early 17th century. Realizing that traditional hieroglyphic texts were particularly vulnerable to destruction, Maya scribes began transcribing their contents into alphabetic Mayan texts. These notaries, who also recorded land sales and wills, preserved local histories and other forms of knowledge, including calendrical, botanical, and medicinal information. Some of these texts were direct copies of ancient hieroglyphic works, while others incorporated Catholic teachings and European influences. The books of Chilam Balam in Yucatec and the Popol Vuh in Quiché are among the most famous examples of these efforts. Together with the 4 surviving pre-colonial glyphic codices and numerous colonial-era community histories, these texts represent an invaluable cultural and intellectual heritage for the Maya people today. Artistic traditions, so central to Maya life before European contact, were transformed but not destroyed. Men continued to create and copy books, adapting to the alphabetic script that replaced glyphs. They also carved figurines, which increasingly depicted Christian saints or the Virgin Mary, reflecting the blending of Maya and European influences. Women, for their part, played a crucial role in preserving local weaving traditions. The embroidered dress or tunic, known as the ipil, remained a cornerstone of Maya identity. Woven on backstrap looms, these garments absorbed new materials and styles over time, but retained their fundamental purpose: to signify the wearer's Maya heritage. This tradition, like so many others, endures to this day, a testament to the resilience and adaptability of Maya culture. In the early 19th century, profound changes began to ripple through Maya communities, reshaping their lives in ways that would leave lasting scars. The governments of the newly formed republics, starting in the 1820s, sought to integrate indigenous peoples more fully into the emerging nation-states. This process, however, came at a steep cost. Local political autonomy, once a cornerstone of Maya life, was steadily eroded. Communal lands, which had been cultivated and protected for generations, were broken apart, their legal foundations dismantled. In the name of progress and modernization, new systems of labor exploitation emerged, forcing many Mayas into grueling, near-slavery conditions on henequen plantations in northern Yucatan, or coffee plantations in southern Guatemala. By the 1840s, the Maya began to resist this new wave of conquest. Their resistance would persist for over a century, often met with escalating violence. In Yucatan, internal conflicts among the ruling Hispanic factions spiraled into civil war by 1847. Amid this turmoil, Maya fighters found themselves on both sides of the conflict. However, when independent Maya groups in the southeast formed a temporary alliance against the government in Mérida, the majority of Maya men joined the cause. For a time, they gained loose control over much of the peninsula, even surrounding Mérida itself. Yet, the alliance faltered as men returned to their villages to tend to their cornfields, leaving the struggle unfinished. The Hispanic elite, seeking to reframe the conflict, labeled it a race war, calling it the War of the Castes. The fighting reignited in 1850 and simmered in the eastern regions for decades. The independent Maya capital in the southeast remained defiant, withstanding Mexican government forces until 1901. Central to this resistance was the talking cross, a sacred oracular symbol that inspired and guided the Maya. Those who followed it became known as the Cruzob, a term derived from the Spanish word for cross in the Yucatec Maya plural. The Cruzob state, formally established in 1849, was even recognized as an independent nation by the British Empire, whose colony of British Honduras, modern-day Belize, bordered the Maya territory. This recognition lasted until 1893, when the tensions escalated after British citizens were killed during a Cruzob raid on the Hispanic outpost of Bacalar. Though the Cruzob state diminished after 1901, its spirit endured. General Francisco May, a key leader, refused to sign a formal peace treaty with the Mexican government until 1935. Even into the late 20th century, talking crosses could still be found in southeastern Maya villages and ancient sites like Tulum. Yet, it was not military conquest, but the rise of international tourism in the 1970s that ultimately dismantled the last vestiges of Maya autonomy in the region. Today, Tulum draws hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, transforming the sacred into a spectacle. To the south, in Guatemala, the Maya faced their own struggles. Sporadic uprisings in the 18th century had been sparked by perceived violations of the colonial moral economy, a fragile balance of exploitation that the Maya had begrudgingly accepted. When those limits were breached, revolts erupted, such as in Chiapas in 1712 and in highland Guatemala between 1735 and 1768. After independence in 1821, this balance was shattered. Yet, under Rafael Carrera, a leader of partial Maya descent who rose to power in 1838, the Maya found a brief respite. Carrera used Maya rebels to secure his rule, and for a time, their lands and autonomy were somewhat protected. However, even Carrera eventually encouraged the spread of coffee plantations, encroaching on Maya lands and labor. After his death in 1865, the Hispanic elite moved swiftly to dismantle what remained of Maya protections. For the next 80 years, Guatemala became a land of stark inequality, where a wealthy minority controlled vast estates devoted to export crops, while the Maya majority endured harsh conditions with little political freedom. It wasn't until 1944, in the wake of global shifts during World War II, that Guatemalans ousted the military from power and elected reformist leaders. These leaders promised to restore Maya lands and rights, but their vision often fell short of true respect for Maya autonomy. This brief period of hope, known as the Guatemalan Spring, lasted only a decade before it, too, was extinguished. In 1954, a military coup, orchestrated by the CIA and supported by the U.S. government, brought the military back into power in Guatemala. What followed was a series of repressive regimes sustained by state terror campaigns. These campaigns were bolstered by U.S. financial and military aid, which, in turn, inspired organized protests from Maya communities and the formation of non-Maya guerrilla groups. The conflict escalated into an undeclared civil war, claiming nearly 10,000 lives in the 1960s and even more in the 1970s. Maya villagers found themselves increasingly caught in the crossfire, often accused by the military government of aiding the guerrillas. In 1978, the violence reached a horrifying new level. The army massacred over 100 unarmed Quechua Mayas, including children. This marked the beginning of a genocidal campaign against the Maya people. Entire villages were wiped out. By the early 1990s, as the conflict moved toward a United Nations-sponsored peace agreement, the toll was staggering. Around 200,000 people had been killed, many of them after being tortured or forcibly disappeared. The vast majority of the victims were Maya. Additionally, 1 million people were displaced, with a significant portion fleeing to countries to the north. Again, most of these refugees were Maya. The war compounded the already devastating effects of large-scale export agriculture on Maya communities. Just as anti-indigenous violence and economic liberalism in the 19th century had displaced the Maya from their homes and lands, the 20th century saw neoliberal economic policies combine with state-sponsored violence to fuel genocidal outbursts. This created a diaspora of Maya migrants and refugees, scattering their communities far and wide. As the Civil War drew to a close, Maya communities began seeking ways to recover and rebuild. They aimed to regain some measure of autonomy within the broader context of powerful nation-states and the forces of globalization. The quincentennial of Columbus's first voyage in 1992 became a pivotal moment. Maya intellectuals and activists used the occasion to present their perspective on the past 5 centuries. This sparked a Maya intellectual renaissance, which helped to forge a pan-Maya movement. Slowly but steadily, this movement began spreading from Guatemala to other Maya regions. That same year, Rigoberta Menchú, a Quiché Maya, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Her family had been tortured and killed in Guatemala during the early 1980s, and her 1984 memoir brought international attention to the plight of the Maya. Although her memoir later became the subject of controversy, some questioned how much of it was her personal story versus a collective account of Maya experiences. Her Nobel Prize and decades of activism gave the Maya struggle for autonomy a global platform. Meanwhile, in Chiapas, Mexico, worsening economic conditions, political corruption, and the influx of refugees from the Guatemalan Civil War set the stage for another significant event. In 1994, the Tzotzil and Tzeltal Mayas in Chiapas rose up in rebellion. The Zapatista National Liberation Army emerged, and while the Mexican government dispatched the army to suppress the uprising, the feared violent repression and massacres of Maya villagers did not materialize. Instead, the Zapatistas adapted to the changing times. With the advent of the Internet, they used global news media and social platforms to garner sympathy and support for their cause. Over time, their army evolved into a political movement, and their rebellion became a broader campaign for indigenous rights. This movement, like others across the Maya region, sought to use political, legislative, and legal means to secure autonomy for indigenous communities. In southern Belize, the Quechua Maya were engaged in a similar struggle. They fought against incursions on their lands and worked to preserve their community autonomy. Like their counterparts in Chiapas and Guatemala, they took their fight to both national and international arenas, seeking recognition and justice. While these modern struggles unfolded, the story of the ancient Maya continued to evolve in parallel. When the Spanish first encountered Maya towns and cities, they generally accepted that the local people had built them. Diego de Landa, for instance, noted that the monumental structures in the Yucatan were clearly the work of the indigenous people. However, over time, this perception began to shift. Spaniards, and later Europeans and white North Americans, started to question the origins of these ancient cities. This shift in perception led to the repeated rediscovery of Maya ruins and the emergence of the mystery surrounding who had built them. Several factors contributed to this change in perspective. First, long-term patterns of migration in the Maya region meant that some towns and cities had already been abandoned by the time the Spanish arrived. This was particularly true in the central region, where the so-called collapse had occurred. Second, the violence and epidemics that accompanied the Spanish conquest caused a dramatic decline in the Maya population. Within a century of the first major Spanish invasions in the 1520s, the Maya population had plummeted by roughly 80%, from an estimated 10 million to just 2 million. In areas where Spanish colonies were established, policies of congregation or forced resettlement further disrupted Maya communities. Survivors from scattered towns were relocated to central towns, a move designed to facilitate their conversion to Christianity and their exploitation as laborers. At the same time, some cities underwent architectural transformations. In the Yucatan, for example, the Maya city of Tijo became Mérida, and Itzmal became Izamal. European-style buildings replaced Maya palaces and homes, temples were destroyed, and churches were built atop pyramid bases. These changes further obscured the connection between the contemporary Maya and the builders of the ancient cities. The shift in perception was gradual. Early Spanish visitors to ancient Maya sites often described what they saw without questioning whether the builders had been local. In the 1530s, the Franciscan Jacinto Garrido explored Palenque and described it in detail, while Diego Garcia de Palacio vividly depicted Copán in a 1576 letter to the Spanish king. Neither of them speculated about foreign architects or outside influences. Even over a century later, as Spanish missionaries traveled through the Maya region on the eve of the 1697 destruction of the Itza Maya kingdom, they encountered sites like Tikal, and Yaxchilan. They described these places without doubting that they had been built by the Maya, even if they did not explicitly label them as such. And so, the story of the Maya, both ancient and modern, continued to unfold, shaped by centuries of upheaval, resilience, and rediscovery. The ancient Maya civilization has long been a source of fascination and mystery, its ruins inspiring countless interpretations and speculations over the centuries. Even in the earliest accounts by explorers, one can sense the seeds of intrigue that later writers and adventurers would cultivate. For instance, when Garrido encountered the hieroglyphic texts at Palenque, he was captivated by their complexity. Yet, lacking a frame of reference, he imagined them to be Chaldean letters, a script he associated with the ancient Aramaic language. It was likely the only non-alphabetic writing system he had ever encountered, and so he drew parallels to what he knew, even if the connection was far from accurate. Similarly, Garcia de Palacio, upon observing the grandeur of Copán's ancient structures, was struck by their sophistication. He described the buildings as superb and skillful, marveling at their construction. Yet, he could not reconcile their magnificence with the people he saw living in the region. He concluded that such works could not have been created by the ancestors of the local inhabitants, whom he deemed too primitive. Still, he did attribute the ruins to a group we now recognize as the Maya, referencing local lore that spoke of a great lord from Yucatan who had come to build these edifices. This tale, intriguingly, echoes the historical record of Teotihuacan's influence in founding Copán's ruling dynasty centuries earlier. By the 18th century, however, a different narrative had taken hold. The prevailing belief among Spanish settlers, priests, and officials was that the indigenous peoples living near these ruins could not possibly be connected to the grandeur of the ancient stone cities. Palenque, for example, became a frequent site of visits, damage, and looting. One visitor, Antonio del Rio, speculated that while the Romans may not have conquered the Maya, they must have visited the region. He imagined that these ancient visitors had inspired the locals to adopt their artistic practices as a form of gratitude for their hospitality. This idea, though unfounded, reflected a broader tendency to attribute the achievements of the Maya to external influences, rather than to the ingenuity of the Maya themselves. The 19th century saw a continuation of this pattern, as explorer writers began publishing accounts and illustrations of Maya ruins. These individuals, often influenced by Romanticism and European imperialist ideals, were convinced that the civilization they were discovering had Old World origins. Figures like Jean-Frédéric de Waldeck and Lord Kingsborough searched for evidence of connections to ancient Rome, Greece, Egypt, or even India. When they failed to find such evidence, they simply imagined or invented it. Their artistic depictions of Maya monuments were often altered to align with their preconceived notions, incorporating elements like elephants, animals not native to the Americas but common in other exotic art forms. These early illustrations, created before the advent of photography, reflected the biases of their time, reinforcing the idea that the Maya civilization must have been shaped by external European influences. One of the most influential figures of this era was John Lloyd Stephens, an American traveler and writer who explored sites like Palenque and Uxmal. Accompanied by English architect Frederick Catherwood, Stephens documented his journeys in vivid detail, while Catherwood's lithographs brought the ruins to life for readers. Their work captivated audiences and has remained popular since the 1840s, fueling ongoing interest in the Maya. While Stevens was more willing than his predecessors to credit the achievements of the Maya to the indigenous peoples, he still framed their history as an enigma to be unraveled, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Following Stevens and Catherwood, the study of the Maya began to take two distinct paths. One stream, largely amateur and speculative, continued to search for external origins for the Maya's accomplishments. This approach, often dismissed by professional archaeologists as the lunatic fringe of Maya studies, gave rise to increasingly outlandish theories. For example, late 19th century explorers like Désiré Charnay and Augustus Le Plongeon were convinced of connections between the Maya and ancient civilizations in Asia or the Mediterranean. Le Plongeon, in particular, proposed a link between the Maya and ancient Egypt, suggesting that both were remnants of the lost continent of Atlantis. His ideas influenced figures like James Churchward, who later argued that the Maya were survivors of a lost Pacific continent he called Mu. As the 20th century progressed, these speculative theories evolved into even more fantastical claims. The fascination with ancient Egypt, which had fueled earlier pseudoscientific theories, gave way in the 1960s to the rise of the ancient aliens hypothesis. This theory proposed that early human civilizations, including the Maya, had been guided by extraterrestrial beings during a period of paleocontact. One of the most prominent advocates of this idea was Swiss author Erich von Däniken. His 1968 book Chariots of the Gods became a global sensation, selling millions of copies and popularizing the notion that the carved lid of the sarcophagus of Kienich Janaab Pakal Varir, a 7th century Maya ruler, depicted him as a spaceman piloting a rocket ship. While such ideas may seem absurd, they have proven remarkably enduring. Despite being thoroughly debunked by professional archaeologists, these theories continue to captivate the public imagination. They reach far more readers and viewers than the well-researched findings of academic scholars. Unfortunately, these misconceptions perpetuate harmful stereotypes, suggesting that non-white peoples could not have achieved the remarkable accomplishments of the Maya without outside help. In doing so, they obscure the true ingenuity and cultural richness of the ancient Maya civilization, replacing it with a narrative that diminishes their legacy. The story of Maya studies is one of evolving perspectives, shaped by the interplay of discovery, interpretation, and the enduring allure of mystery. From the outset, scholars have debated the origins and influences of this ancient civilization. One stream of thought, emerging in the wake of explorers like Stevens and Catherwood, held that the Maya civilization was autochthonous, rooted deeply in the soil of Mesoamerica, a region stretching from northern Mexico to the southern edges of the Maya world. This view emphasized that the Maya were shaped primarily by interactions with other Mesoamerican cultures, rather than by external influences from distant lands. As the field of Maya studies matured, particularly during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a more systematic approach began to take hold. Scholars like Alfred Maudslay spearheaded efforts to document and preserve the remnants of Maya civilization. Every glyph, monument, and structure was meticulously recorded, drawn, and photographed. This era marked the birth of scientific archaeology, where data collection and peer evaluation replaced the speculative musings of earlier explorers. Yet, even as the field professionalized, it retained echoes of its romanticized beginnings. The image of the Maya as peace-loving farmers, ruled by stargazing priests, persisted. This portrayal, while captivating, was incomplete. For much of the 20th century, the Maya were often depicted as otherworldly, almost non-human, as archaeologist George Stewart once remarked. They were seen as gentle astronomers, forever gazing at the heavens, detached from the more mundane or violent aspects of human existence. This perception was reinforced by the focus of early fieldwork, which concentrated on the monumental city centers, palaces, temples, and ceremonial spaces. These sites were interpreted as purely religious or ceremonial, leading to the belief that the Maya cities were not cities in the conventional sense. The everyday lives of the farmers and non-elite members of Maya society remained largely invisible in the archaeological record. One of the most influential proponents of this idealized view was Sir Eric Thompson, whose interpretations dominated Maya studies until his death in 1975. Under his influence, the Maya were seen as a uniquely peaceful and spiritual people, distinct from the more warlike civilizations of the ancient world. However, as the 20th century progressed, this narrative began to shift. Breakthroughs in the decipherment of Maya hieroglyphs revealed a more complex picture. The glyphs told stories not only of astronomy and calendrics, but also of politics, warfare, and the lives of rulers. Archaeological work expanded beyond the grand city centers to include smaller sites, suburban areas, and the living spaces of ordinary people. The Maya emerged as a civilization that was urban, dynamic, and, at times, warlike, more akin to other human societies than previously imagined. Yet, the element of mystery has never fully disappeared from Maya studies. Even in the academic realm, scholars sometimes find themselves drawn to the dramatic narratives that captivate the public. The allure of discovery and the enigma of disappearance continue to shape the field. Just as explorers of the past discovered Maya sites that had long been known to local communities, modern archaeologists often frame their findings as groundbreaking revelations. This tendency can create a paradox. The Maya are simultaneously portrayed as a civilization that vanished, and as a people whose culture and traditions endure to this day. The notion of disappearance is particularly misleading. While the collapse of the classic Maya civilization around the 9th century remains a subject of fascination, it is important to recognize that the Maya did not vanish. Their descendants continue to live in the region, preserving many aspects of their cultural heritage. The Maya civilization, in a sense, has never ceased to exist. The story of the Maya is also one of adaptation and resilience. Over centuries, Maya communities have faced waves of change, from the arrival of European colonizers to the introduction of new technologies, crops, and cultural practices. These changes have often been double-edged swords, bringing both opportunities and challenges. The introduction of Old World diseases in the 16th and 17th centuries had a devastating impact, reducing the Maya population to a fraction of its pre-colonial size. Yet, the arrival of domesticated animals like cattle, pigs, and chickens diversified the Maya diet and contributed to the development of new cuisines. The adoption of new crops, such as citrus fruits, also brought benefits, but not without costs. The suitability of certain regions for sugar and coffee farming led to the exploitation of Maya lands, particularly in Guatemala during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The environmental impact of cattle ranching and the encroachment of non-Maya landowners further disrupted traditional ways of life. Even the introduction of sugar had mixed consequences. While it provided a new source of income, it also brought cheap cane alcohol, which proved more harmful to health than traditional fermented beverages like chicha and balche. which were often consumed in controlled ritual contexts. The tension between tradition and change continues to shape the lives of Maya communities. At the turn of the 21st century, for example, Cachico Maya farmers faced a difficult choice. Should they grow maize and beans for local consumption, or should they cultivate broccoli for export markets? The latter offered the promise of higher profits, but came with risks, including market volatility and the potential loss of traditional agricultural practices. Through it all, the Maya have demonstrated remarkable resilience. Their ability to adapt to new circumstances while preserving core aspects of their identity is a testament to their enduring strength. The story of the Maya is not one of disappearance, but of continuity and transformation. A civilization that has weathered the storms of history and remains vibrant to this day. The story of the Maya is one of resilience, adaptation, and transformation, a narrative that stretches across centuries and continents. Over the past 500 years, the introduction of new materials and technologies has profoundly shaped their way of life. Iron and steel, for instance, revolutionized farming, making it easier to cultivate the land. Gunpowder simplified fishing and hunting. Yet, these advancements came with a cost. The ability to clear forests more efficiently and reduce wildlife populations was a double-edged sword, bringing both progress and loss. As time went on, the transportation and communication revolutions left their mark on Maya communities. Railroads, buses, cars, and motorcycles connected once isolated villages to the wider world. Telephones, television, and eventually the Internet brought new ideas and opportunities, fostering a Maya diaspora. This diaspora was not solely the result of war and displacement. Many families, unscarred by conflict, sought work in distant places, whether in the United States, Mexico City, or the bustling tourist hubs of Cancun and the Maya Riviera. Despite the physical distance, these families maintained strong ties to their communities, creating a network that spanned borders. The history of Mayan languages mirrors this story of change. Since the 16th century, these languages have experienced both loss and renewal. Some Mayan tongues disappeared entirely, while others saw their vocabulary and grammar eroded under the influence of Spanish and English. For centuries, educational systems in the region operated exclusively in Spanish, often banning the use of Mayan languages. Yet, even in the face of such challenges, most Mayan speakers became bilingual or multilingual, a trend that continues to grow. But the story of Mayan languages is not solely one of decline. Contact with Spanish and English introduced new words and concepts, just as earlier interactions with Nahuatl had done. Language, after all, is inherently dynamic, constantly evolving through contact and change. In recent years, efforts to revitalize Mayan languages have gained momentum, aided by the very forces that once seemed to threaten them. Television, the Internet, and globalization have become tools for preservation and growth. Today, Mayan languages can be heard in online language lessons, in videos of musicians performing in Yucatec, and in countless other digital spaces. This pattern of change, adoption, and hybridization is not unique to the Maya. It is a universal aspect of human culture, a constant throughout history. For the Maya, this process has brought both gains and losses, enriching their civilization while also challenging their traditions. In the early 21st century, this cultural fusion is evident across the Maya world. From the Pan-Mayanist movements in Guatemala to the Zapatista communities in Chiapas, from indigenous leaders in Yucatan and Belize to Maya intellectuals and activists in the diaspora. The blending of old and new continues to shape their struggle for autonomy. The challenge of adaptation is not new to the Maya. It has been a defining feature of their history, long before the arrival of Europeans. In the 21st century, this adaptability has given rise to a Maya world that is both deeply rooted in tradition and profoundly modern. Some aspects of Maya life today appear timeless, direct continuations of ancient practices. Others are unmistakably contemporary, shaped by new technologies and global connections. Yet, for the Maya themselves, their culture is not a patchwork of old and new. It is a cohesive, self-sustained system, independent of the historical forces that have influenced it. The Maya world of today is vast and diverse, stretching across national borders and continents. It encompasses rural villages and bustling cities, communities that speak Mayan languages, and those that communicate primarily in Spanish. Some Maya lead lives deeply tied to their local traditions, while others are highly mobile, part of a global diaspora. Their religious practices are equally varied, drawing from Catholicism, Protestantism, and traditional folk beliefs. Despite this diversity, there remains a sense of unity, a shared identity that allows us to speak meaningfully of a Maya civilization in the 21st century. This civilization is not static. It is alive, evolving, and multifaceted. It is a testament to the Maya's ability to navigate the complexities of history, to adapt without losing themselves. Their story is one of survival and creativity, a reminder that even in the face of profound change, a culture can endure, transform, and thrive.